All right, Joe Hardcore, here we go, man. How you doing today?
No, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, early Sunday morning. Figured you wouldn't be hungover, so it'd be easy to get you earlier.
I get up at 4:30 to 5 every day. So my early get up on a Sunday is like 8,
Yeah,
maybe 7, and usually I'm awake at 7 going, fuck, I got to get to bed by 8.
yeah. I think I got you beat, man. I wake up at like 2:30 on the weekdays. I'm to work by like 3:15 and fucking in a truck.
God bless. Are you out by 1 or 2, or are you doing like 12, 13-hour shifts?
No, I'm usually off before 11 a.m. I'm like 8 hours.
See,
I got it fucking sweet.
we pour concrete in the summer, and I fucking hate the summer, and I hate the heat. But they'll say 2 o'clock start, and I would much rather work those hours than anything. You have the whole day, and you can nap. It's beautiful.
Hell yeah. Yeah, so I mean, let's just get into it. I know some of your history from like the other podcasts I've listened to, but for somebody who hasn't caught it, how did you get into alternative music from the get-go and hardcore specifically?
I was raised in a very unorthodox house. Um, my parents were absolutely younger than most parents, so there was never like something that wouldn't be a direct relationship back to what would eventually get me into hardcore. Be it Black Sabbath records, Ozzy Osbourne records on my floor. My mom wrote graffiti, and when she was a couple years, I mean, my mom had me when she was 17, but she was writing graffiti at 13, so she was really big into be it Parliament, Funkadelics, and then heavier metal stuff. My dad was in the rocking stuff. When they split, my house was basically a hair metal party house. So there was tons of people in my house, and eventually I was exposed to thrash metal. Later on, someone who my mother knew made a tape because she said, "Oh, my son listens to metal," and on that tape had Agnostic Front, Carnivore, um, a lot of different bands that would basically be the window. But consequently, seeing people that are older than me in the neighborhood that I was friends with, older cousins, little by little exposed me to that kind of music. But by the time I was 11 years old, I had a like full past my shoulders long hair. I was wearing Metallica, Megadeth shirts, and was completely in all about thrash metal, then later death metal. My mother was booking actual like rock bands, and her boyfriends were band dudes. And I was allowed to go to all ages death metal shows. And then consequently, because I was hanging on South Street, which is a strip in Philadelphia that had a lot of record stores, we were basically like looking around and see a show on a marquee. And I went and seen Biohazard, was sick of it all, and Sheer Terror was my first hardcore show. And I was only 13 years old, but I was already like completely exposed to heavy metal. I had older friends, so it was easy to go to shows. And from there was like the downward path towards going to just shows instead of doing most of what normal people do.
Damn. How old were you when you went to that Biohazard show?
I was 13 years old.
Fucking 13. I mean, the
I
only
was
concert.
actually, I was actually, that was the year I turned 13. I think because that was April, I was 12, turning 13. But at the time, there was all ages death metal matinees at a small venue called the Cell Block. And I live in a really shitty neighborhood, and my mother was well aware that being a white long hair kid in a pretty bad neighborhood wasn't a good look. So she was kind of like, if you guys all going to go down to the shows together, like, I never went there. I didn't go to a show by myself till I was almost like 18 or 19 because there was always people that we would get on the train with. And we lived 1 or 2 blocks from where the train station started. It was an elevated train, the L train. So a big part of Philly hardcore for our neighborhood was just meeting people on that train, or like bisecting people would take the buses that would get to the train. That train was 16 stops from our neighborhood to downtown. The first 8 were all bad, retarded neighborhoods like ours. And you just started linking up with people to see a cool shirt, a cool patch. And so we were never really alone. So it was another, when I say like, oh, I was going to shows, yeah, by the time we got down to the show, there was already like my first show I went with about 5 or 6 people who were probably 15, 16, already in high school. And by the time by the time I was doing shows like 1997, I was 16. I booked my first show. I mean, we get on an L train. There might be a whole L car full of people because our neighborhood just kept getting more and more involved. So it's weird to say, oh yeah, I was 12 years old, but I wasn't like a by myself person for quite some time.
Yeah, lots of older, like some sort of older brother types, just on the train going to the same place. You get to
Yeah,
recognize them, familiar with them, as the shows go on and shit.
yeah. So like even when um, I was I was 16 years old, had to quit school because I was going to be a dad. Wasn't prepared for it. Me and my best friend, we would just listen to records. I got him a job at the bowling alley I was working at, and my mom knew I was super bummed about like basically my whole life changing because I was going to be a dad. So she got us tickets for the Agnostic Front reunion, and there was like a window of like 2 days where I didn't think I was going to be able to go to New York, and my boy Carmen's like, dude, we got to do this. Agnostic Fronts were coming back, and after we saw that show and came back on the train the next day, we were just like, fuck this, Agnostic Fronts back. We're not. I mean, literally, I was like, oh, gonna have to be normal and get a job and not be able to go to shows as much. And I was like, fuck this. Agnostic Front's coming back. I'm like, I'm not giving up on
Mm.
hardcore. And it's a weird thing to think about, but that really was a energizing point where there was times when I was taking a train and sleeping on the train station because we would go up to North Jersey and the train would stop running the one from Jersey to Philly at like 2 a.m. and we would miss it. And I'd have to wait to get on the next train to go home. There was actually a lot of traveling that we would do like that from the time I was like 16 to 18, just so I stayed involved in hardcore because the rest of my life was pretty shitty. So I guess to the short question is I went to shows at a very young age because I was already allowed to go to death metal shows and metal shows. And then once I found hardcore, it was pretty much the complete change of my entire life.
Yeah. I started off like going to like punk shows. Wasn't so much into metal and like deathcore and shit like that, or death metal. It was just I started with like Dropkick Murphys, the Casualties, like the dirty like street punk shit.
Oh
Just
yeah,
that was my influence. Like people I bumped into, like wearing like the Casualties with like Liberty spikes and shit. Like these people are fucking crazy, but I liked it. At the time.
in uh in our neighborhood, there were punks and skinheads who were older than us, and I actually lived down the street as like a single digits child from one of the punk venues. And I remember my uncle and the neighborhood were like, "Go inside, punk rockers are coming," because they basically didn't want the punks walking down the street. So because I was a child of the '80s, I used to see the big mohawks, the spikes, and I thought it was the coolest shit. But there was no one really at in my scope of influence that were really into punk. But through going to metal shows, I saw it a lot, and there was a lot of transfer over. And when I talk about metal shows, I'm talking about like seeing like Cannibal Corpse, and I'm trying to think of some of the smaller shows. Like we would see Cannibal Corpse, Testament, um, the beginnings of like when Dying Fetus would start saying like Suffocation the first time they came down. Like this is like 1990, 1991, 1992. And then we would go down to the Trocadero, which is like a room that like was still well known and very famous, even though it's closed. And that's where you would see the bigger concerts. And like I was allowed to like legit stay outside to get tickets, which is such a archaic, anachronistic thing now. But like we would go and sit outside and wait to get tickets. Like we didn't see Megadeth. I see White Zombie and the Ramones, like and Danzig, Guar. But in that, there's so many interactions with people in South Street specifically. There was a street of stores that was more like hip hop, but a ton of like legit old school punk stores that have been around forever. So we were exposed to all the punk stuff. And in fact, and when I was talking about going down on the L trains, there was a casualty show in a squat in a neighborhood down that's like every house is worth well over $500,000. And I think there was like 50 of us on the train to go down and see Casualties and Violent Society. And that was a show that I try to mimic in 2013. We basically did a venue that was shut down. It was a bar that I used to live over top of, and they were closed, but we had the keys to it. And when the electric was still on, and we did Casualties and one of the bands, Tribe 13 from this area, to try to mimic that same show. So I grew up as a long hair, but appreciated all that. And our neighborhood was kind of cross between long haired dudes that were into hardcore, straight up like hood rat looking kids that were into hardcore and punk, and then like dudes that were wearing army jackets and fucked up clothes and kind of listen to anything from like Casualties to Sick of It All, Agnostic
Mhm.
Front, and a lot of dudes that shave their heads. So I was never good at adorning myself and like to look extra. You know, I'd like
Mhm.
to say like hoodies,
Yeah,
pants, combat boots. The skinheads in our city would take fresh cuts, Doc Martens, and none of us had the money for Doc Martens. So we were wearing like Vietnam jungle boots and like like
for
combat boots.
sure.
But I would say that seeing the Casualties as a kid before they got big, and like I mean, this is like a year or two before there was ever even a Warped Tour and like a squat, gave me such an interesting perspective to like, okay, punk shows literally can happen everywhere. And we would later go to a place called Stalag 13, which is out in West Philadelphia, and I seen like the Ducky Boys and a lot of punk skinhead stuff, a lot of like D beat shit, like everything possible there. There's like a DIY venue, and yeah, so I listened to all that stuff at the same time, just I think a different era before that.
Yeah, fuck. Yeah, I know. It's weird because I was all into like the street punk, and then I started working with somebody who was who he used to be into like punk, then he moved on to be like a skinhead, but then somehow he crossed over into the hardcore scene. So like everything like he found, like he would say, you gotta fucking check this shit out. Like it started with like agnostic front. This was like it's like 2003, like 2004 is like agnostic front, fucking death threat. Like, he would just hammer me with all these bands, fucking blood for blood. Like he would just it's like burn me CDs like here, check all this shit out. I'm passing on to you because fucking somebody needs to know about this. So I was sort of just exposed to everything at once. And then it was just like full on from there because it just got me excited more about the lyrics than the music. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think hardcore lyrics, especially the bands that I find when you can relate to a band, you absorb the lyrics and the content a little bit deeper. And all those bands you listed, like are all formidable bands that there's a reason why even Death Threat and who's probably like the youngest band of that, their music is something special, but it's lyrics that Aaron writes that really keeps people, and every generation binds into those lyrics. It's pretty cool, man. And I think that like the punk lyrics, like obviously, you know, uh, punks and skins, like you're gonna have I love the Casualties. I still booked them, but
That's
at some
fucking
point,
crazy.
yeah, I mean, well, I like there's just something classic. But I think the the hardcore lyrics are stuff that resonates more with people than I'd say
Yeah.
your cookie cutter average punk band. Not to say that about Casualties because they're one of my favorite bands.
Yeah, no, it's just a different thing, and I never really identified with the whole like, extra thing like you said too. I never had the Liberty spikes. I was normally like a shaved head. I think the worst I got was maybe like a studded jacket. I wasn't wearing the fucking straps and the boots and all that stuff, but I still appreciate those people.
I'm envious. If I could run it back, I would have went all out and dressed like a mix between like Demolition and the Road Warriors from but I was so you gotta remember I was young, and on top of it, a lot I mean, hardcore now is a little different. You could be like an 18-year-old kid and you're kicking everybody in the room, but like 16 years old, there was a serious pecking order. So you had to know your place. And like
Fuck yeah,
if you would have came out, if you would have came out super punk rocked up, you would have got beat up.
quick.
If you would have came out perfect boots and braces, old dudes would have fucked with you. And there was kind of a need to know your role and slide into your role. And so, I dressed the way I dressed, still kind of I don't know how to dress like a normal person, but I don't think that I ever did one style perfect. And like when later on they came out with like that Your Scene Sucks, well, like the perfect. I never, I never wore the tightest pants. I never. I have a shit ton of Fred Perry's. I got I've got Harrington jackets. Like I got the stuff, but can never have a full look. But if I got to do it differently, ostentatious and just not give a fuck would definitely been a way more badass thing to go for, just because fuck it. But back then it was a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, it would be awesome now. You can fucking wear it and say, "This is the way I want to dress today." So what? You know.
I go full credit to the kids that are able to do that now. And I book a lot of different shows like Leftover Crack, and we had a bunch of different bands that have come through, like even like Toxic Holocaust and stuff like that.
Oh
And
yeah.
there's this draw that comes from kids who are way open to just dress as they feel. And in thinking about what we didn't have was Instagram and Facebook and this like image to project. These kids have these images in front of them all the time, so they're trying to like match and meet that projection. So you see kids more into their look than we were. We were not really concerned with looks as much.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like a fashion show still, but that it is what it is. But it seems like as they grow older, they're not so interested in the way they look anymore, or care how they look, because I think there just comes a certain age to where you're just over how you look, and like who gives a fuck now?
No, absolutely. I think
Yeah.
image is a projection, and that's the case for all things. And then there's also like there's something special when you're like putting your shit on. Like for us, this is gonna sound like a little fucked up, but like there was way more involved with like especially at big clubs, like sneaking weapons in, making sure everybody was there at the same time in case like we had a lot of beefs with people as a city, less like singular crews, but like a whole city knew like this is a show where a bunch of Nazis are coming out. So like it was the unwritten rule, and then it became like the rule. Like everyone met up somewhere else and then came down to the show together. And there was like, the hardcore version of that opening scene is the Gangs of New York when everyone was getting ready. Everyone's like, all right, getting brass knuckles, hiding shit in your shoes. That's why I first shaved my head was I got tired of getting in these stupid fights at shows and someone grabbing me by my hair. So I started shaving my head solely just because, but I looked more like a wigger with a shaved head and combat boots, like big pants, big
Yeah.
sweatpants, combat boots, hoodies, but everyone at shows wore boots. So you get tired of getting your fucking sambas stepped on by some 200-pound dude with boots on.
Yeah, yeah, no shit, man. I was always the 200-pound dude, so I didn't fucking, you know, it wasn't my
Now,
problem.
now, now I've crested well into the 200s, and it's definitely the way to go.
Nah, I mean,
Um,
you're looking good, Joe. I see you, you know, on the side of the stage most times. There's progress that has happened.
yeah, I definitely I got fat for a bit. I've gone through a couple stages where I've grown my hair out, and then 4 years now ago, I grew my hair out for a bit, and I just looked like trash. I shaved my head. I started doing jujitsu, and I lost a shit ton of weight.
Yeah,
But being someone I was a kid in the pits through my entire, early teens into my 20s, even into my 30s. But like as a kid, you're moshing with like grown fucking men, and they're like full ass muscles and they're big as shit.
scary.
Yeah, so like having not you wanted to make sure you had boots on because your toes are getting crushed.
Fuck yeah, yeah, man. I know the feeling. Especially going to this place called Harpo's in Detroit. Like I've gone to a few like smaller venue shows, but the first time I ever went to Harpo's, and you know, Jamie from Hatebreed, he'll say Harpo's is his fucking favorite venue in Detroit. And I seen them, and then Knox to Front, and I think it's Love Is Red played with them as well. And that's the first time I was in a room with like crazy skinheads, like 1,000 people on the floor, just getting fucking smashed in between them. And I was like, so this is what it is, like a real big show. I've been into the small venues, but when it's fucking packed and everyone's on top of each other, some people are trying to hardcore dance, and others are, you know so like you're just getting like smashed by grown men because they want to do the push but thing, but there's like 15 kids that want to mosh the hardcore way. It's fucking scary when you're like 16, 17 years old.
Yeah, that's a great description of what it's like. Um, it's a weird thing. I tell people now, it's like the time that I got into hardcore dancing started being a thing, but it wasn't something that Philly hardcore people naturally did. There was a couple people who would dance like that, and then it was my age group and our group of friends because we were traveling beyond Philly and we're going to Jersey and upstate PA and Long Island and the city, and that's where like what is now most recognized as hardcore moshing was like more prevalent. In Philadelphia, there was a lot of punk rock, a lot of old skinhead dudes. There was two stepping, a lot of the old school stuff, like, you'd see it, like, I don't want to use the Sick of It All video as a reference, but it was still a more traditional mosh style. And then in like 97, 98, 99, as we were older and more people, the pits got more violent. And then going to metal shows was used to be something we could do and kind of like mesh well. Like Fear Factory, Marauder, and Starkweather in like 94. That was something that wasn't like a million fights. But then like just seeing like any metal show, because we're moshing now how hardcore people mosh, there was constantly fights. But there was that moment in time when we were younger, and you got the stage divers, you've got the old metalheads who were just pushing, and you had this weird quasi, some older hardcore dudes weren't really feeling the change over to the kick in and all the other stuff. But it's definitely that chaos moment, and actually something that's lost now because shows are so coordinatedly organized as far as how a mosh pit goes down, that it's very few times in the last couple years where I've been knocked on the ground and like, oh fuck, I'm gonna get crushed or knocked over. And there's also not a shared pit moment. Everyone's doing the same dance at the same time. Whereas like I did a show for Slapshot, and it was a packed bar room, and it was like a circle pit and dudes just punching each other, and it was chaos. I got knocked on the floor and I was like, oh fuck. Like this is real. This is like old school. Like, oh
Yeah,
shit, I'm on the
yeah.
ground. I gotta get back
You
up.
get stomped
And
by boots and beer
yeah,
on
you
you.
didn't know. Like, literally, like I'm like, oh fuck, and like that moment of oh fuck is so lost now that it's I like there's another time. The first time I did Cox Bar, I booked Cox Bar, and Cro-Mags played before them. Now I booked the first Chrome. Actually, it's yesterday was 12 years since the first Cro-Mags, which we now have to call Cro-Mags JM, did a show. I
Yeah,
booked the very first show in Philly, and I was on stage the whole time, just mesmerized. But when I did them a couple years later with Cox Bar, I've seen Cro-Mags a couple times now. We did them. There was nothing cooler than that show because there was exactly what you just said. There was punks, there were skinheads, and the pit was crazy. And it was in a bigger room than even the first show we did. And again, I got knocked on the floor, and I'm like, oh shit. And it reminded me of that young fury of like chaos and not knowing what's going on. I kind of miss that, man. I wish there was more of that chaos.
yeah, yeah. It seems even the hardcore shows could be the most violent. It seems like you can knock down. You're not on the floor for that long. Someone's gonna pick you up. It seems, at least in Detroit anyway. Used to be you're fucking knocked on the ground, you're getting smashed. But there seems be a little bit more unity these days, where if you fall down, someone's gonna grab you, which I appreciate at this older age.
What was
Like
your
pick my fat ass up.
what was your first like Detroit hardcore show? Like your first real one?
Mine, well, okay, well, the first hardcore show that I went to, I didn't know it was hardcore. It was in 2004, maybe summer 2004. It was Righteous Jams, actually. Righteous Jams,
Oh
I think it
shit.
was an Outbreak. They played at a skate shop in Dearborn, Michigan, Refuge skate shop.
Yeah.
It's because of
They
the
did
guy that I
shows there
worked
then.
with. The guy that I worked with, who I said was showing all those bands to me, his band was opening for them. They were called Ambush. Well, it was X Ambush X, but
Yeah.
just like a small thing, nothing big. But he said, whatever, come check this shit out. I was like, okay. And what I thought his band was like, it's sort of like the Righteous Jam sound, maybe a little faster. But to me, that sounded like punk. I was like, I don't know, how is this hardcore? Because I've heard of Terror already, and like he showed me that shit. I was like, I don't hear no breakdowns and this stuff. Um, so I've seen Righteous Jams and Outbreak, and that's the first time I'd ever seen like a side to side pit, like people like running back and forth and creepy crawling and shit like that, because I was used to just like punk push pits. And so that's what interested me, is seeing them like two step and the side to side, just getting fucking smashed against the wall and shit. Cause it was in like a garage. And so um that show I would say was my first hardcore show. But then maybe a few months later, it was either Terror and Unearth had played at this bigger venue
Oh
with
shit.
Converge, I believe. Terror, Converge, and Unearth. And like that, so that was the first time I ever seen Terror play, man. And that's, if you want that to be one of your first couple shows, that's the one to see, because so they had already been established. Everybody knew who Scott Vogel was. They had their Lowest of the Low was out, I believe, already too. So that was fucking intense to see people like diving off the balconies and like the PA stacks like 15 feet in the air and shit. So that was a good experience, you know. And from then on, like, this is what I like. This is a fucking crazy show. Like, people getting punched in the face and, you know, fights. So that's what I really, really like the most.
There was a show that Dysphoria played in '98 in Detroit, and at the St. Andrews Hall, and we knew Cold as Life through them coming through town. You got to remember, I was 17, turning 18. And
Okay.
me and the Dysphoria roadie, Ray, who's a dude who's always on the Post America podcast. Me and Ray are not big people. And we go to this show to see Cold as Life and Dysphoria. And we're on like obviously we're the roadies, so we're loading in and we're like, holy shit, we're in Detroit. This like, and it was everything that we thought Detroit shows were until the band started playing. Cause we were, you know, going to like Fury 5 and All Out War. And the Detroit moshing was more like if you took uh, wrestling, bikers, punk rockers, covered the entire floor in like beer, and everyone smoked as they're moshing, and there's like bottles broke, and there was like a minute when Dysphoria started playing, and you know, as roadies, we like to mosh for the band we're like, you know, supporting.
Right.
I think I got across the floor and moshed into one dude and got thrown, and I was like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, it's some big boys, man.
Yeah, it's like, but like we always say, and I've said it on my podcast a bunch. It's like we went to Detroit, and there's like actual dudes with real face tattoos, like way before this whole thing, way
Oh
before
yeah.
trap rapping, and uh and dude, it was like grown men with full beards and handfuls of like biker rings,
Oh,
and it was
the
just
skulls
a
and
yeah,
D's on them and shit. Yeah.
just a different level of like interaction, and like it's interesting. Like there was never fully dressed down skins, but dudes had shaved heads. There was never like Detroit at that time frame. It was so just a different universe than anything I encountered. That whenever someone's like, "Oh, they're from Detroit," I have to like remember like it was only like 2 years later, and we would be driving to like Ypsilanti, and that whole hardcore scene wasn't there. Like, you know, like
Yeah.
I only seen that one other time in 2001 Above This World, which was like a Mikey Hood project with a bunch of dudes, and Dysphoria would come through again, and we would play in Detroit, and then there was that same chaos, and I'm like, it's just something in the crazy Detroit order at that time that made those Detroit shows nuts. And then by the time Shattered Realm would come through in 2004, and then again in 2005 and play, there was those people who were definitely all from those shows, but the mosh culture in Detroit had and then organized and changed more into the standard way that people mosh now.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna ask you. So so did so you were already booking shows. I was wondering, did you already have a relationship with some Detroit bands like coming through Philly or you know wherever you had booked shows at the time? Because I know you probably had a few cities you would book out of. So there's a few Detroit bands, you know, in the early days, you know, the Cold as Life and the Hate Inks and you know all
So
those Dogs of War.
so um first off, it's a weird, bizarre thing that you probably have heard people talk about, but for those of you who listen, have it. And it, before the age before the internet, you would look at tapes and you would look at CDs and read thanks lists. And you would read the thanks list not to be see who was like getting thanked, but also to read the band names. And it was like the way someone would go into a tomb and read hieroglyphics. So like when
Right.
you would read if you would read a band from out of town shit, you would read their band names. You know, like there's all these like almighty lumberjacks of death and all these like weird bands from Michigan that we were reading. We're like, what the fuck does this band sound like? You know, like Dogs of War was still to this day one of the greatest fucking names ever. And
Yeah.
Enzo's the fucking man. But like,
Shout out to Enzo.
dude, that's my fucking boy. But like,
Yep.
legitimately, that's still one of the actually at that second show I was talking about. He showed up pre-doors wearing a luchador mask. So it's like, all right, what's up, motherfucker? And he's got a
They're
luchador
fucking
mask.
crazy. I
I
love
love
those
him.
guys.
But like that's the thing is, so I was aware. I was first aware of Cold as Life because I was a fan of the Agnostic Front live at CBGB's, and they shout Cold as Life out on that record. And so, um, Ron passed, the era of demo tapes and trading became a thing, and Cold as Life never let Rick to Life have their tapes after a certain point. So you had to get Cold as Life tape secondhand from either a friend, listen to it in the car, and hope you could go see them play. Same thing for their hoodies. Like their hoodies were like the greatest quality, like thicker than anything. Obviously, because you live in Michigan, can't have no thin ass hoodie.
Right.
So, linking up with those guys and at that show, buying like a couple hoodies to take home and getting demo tapes. That was a big thing about being a roadie, but dysphoria because we traveled a lot on the East Coast. And I would always talk to everybody like, yo, I book shows, get demo tapes and try to bring people out. And what had happened is it took until 1999 or 2000. Actually, yeah, it was 2000 when I got to bring Cold as Life, but I didn't get like a weekend show. I got like a Monday night show. So
Mm.
my only time doing Cold as Life with the lineup that I most consider Cold as Life was not the biggest show, but we had Death Threat, Mushmouth, Cold as Life, Dysphoria, and a band called Victory Strike. The singer would be in Horror Show. Now he's in that shoegaze band Nothing. But there might have been only 70 people at it. And so it was hard in the beginning for us to bring bands from out of town out. And that's why I started doing shows was much like all big city scenes, there's little piece of pies where their own little groups of people like certain bands. And so my first inertia to book shows was that there wasn't the kind of bands that I was fucking with getting shows. Like people would wear their shirts and maybe they might open for a bigger show at a big club. But like I wanted to see the bands I was really into and that my friends were into. And so I had to start booking my own shows. But it wouldn't be till we linked up with Lenny and when he was doing Cast and Fire and stuff, where we had like a way big, and that's because those guys are more connected. And at the time, that's like those are the kind of bands that travel more, like in like 97, 98, 99, Cold as Life would come out like once or twice a year. They didn't really come out so much. And when they came out, you kind of followed them. And then when Punishment started playing in 2000, Mike and the band kind of switched up a bit, and Jeff stopped playing guitar and singing. He just sang, and then they were playing a lot, and that's when I got to book them when Jeff was just singing. And but there was a hard time for shows because of the venue problems that we were having because of all the like we had legitimately like actual gunshots and people shot outside of shows for Nazis. There was a lot of stabbings. There was crew shit, and so the venues that we were initially working with from like 97, 98, 99, all those shifted almost on the dot at the end of 2000. And it was harder to get shows. It took me till the end of 2001, which I did that Cold as Life show, to find a venue where I can kind of pull bands in. And I feel like that is an era changing year because a lot of scenes had a shift. Like, all right, it's 2001. You saw certain bands like Cast and Fire come up. The Earth Mover guys going to Cold as Life was doing stuff differently. That whole time shift. So when I was getting more active with being able to bring out of town bands in, there wasn't as much from Detroit, with the exception of Walls of Jericho, who were touring a lot, that we could really help out.
Fuck yeah. Yeah, man. I love Cold as Life. Still one of my favorite bands. A lot of people's favorite band. It seems like there's something with the whole Detroit scene that seems to resonate with how like gritty and grimy it is. Along with Philly and New York, just seems that the major cities seem to have their own sound too, and the crowds and the fans of those bands just seem to stick out more than others. Crazy place.
Well, I feel like the 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 Jeff era demos, there was a rawness that kind of crossed over the way they played the riffs were definitely like a metallic approach to like a punk structure song. And what I really loved the fact that Cold as Life didn't depend upon like, people were like, this is one of the hardest bands, but then you go people who were like waiting for the mosh breakdown. It didn't really happen for them.
Yeah.
Like Born to Land Hard is still one of my favorite CDs because it's so gritty. The lyrics are so raw. and it's kind of like the bridge between the late '90s street culture, um, ideas on hardcore lyrics, and still the old punk stuff from the '80s. And it's just a very unique sound. And then when Declination came out, they were trying a lot of different stuff, and it was like we played a lot with them. In fact, Cold as Life or God Forbid and Diecast did like a run of shows that we were playing through the area, and we had a show drop, and they got us on it. Cold as Life always looked out for Punishment to the point where like I've stayed at Jeff's house, stayed at Mike's and his cousin's house. Like the thing that hardcore culture still had at that time was you didn't really you didn't really play a show with a band and then not stay at their house. Like we played a house show in fucking Windsor, Canada, because we played a show in Ypsilanti with crazy ass Lenny. And like we like party with those fucking maniacs, them, and that's how we got to know the dudes from Windsor, that band Face Down, the
Yep.
Canada band. And there was always like the scene was small, so you get to interact and know them guys and stay friends with them guys. And it's like that's a part of hardcore that I think comes from relating to people. Like same thing like when I became boys with Dom, and like Dom, he was from Canada, but he had a big love for all that stuff. And so we had a lot to relate to. And I feel like sometimes now with the internet, you become people's friends because you follow them, but you don't know them. But if you played a show any in that time frame, it wasn't like, all right, here's your money, see you on the way. Nah, man, they came out to the show, they hung out, you'd go eat with them, you'd stay at their house, they'd be like, hey, come stay at my house. Like, we that's exactly what would happen. The first and second time Dysphoria would come and stay. We stay with people in Cold as Life or their friends or family, and then same thing happened with Punishment, even up until 2002 when Punishment and Powerhouse came through. But the shows were out in Ypsilanti instead of being in Detroit. There was always a connection between the people in the bands from the scene and the bands that were coming through, and I like that. Like whatever Cold as Life, whenever Hoods came around, every single member of that band was wearing Cold as Life gear. I remember when we saw them in '98, we're like, where did you get that hoodie? Like, dude, this is the best hoodie I've always, and then like we went down that same year and we're like, we have to get them hoodies. They're so fucking nice. Like there was something special about Cold as Life in the fact that that was a grown band. And I don't know if you talked to them on your podcast yet, but there was this interesting moment where Punishment was coming through. We were supposed to play in Windsor, but there was the WTO riot and we couldn't get across the bridge.
Mm.
So Mike and Big Dog and them were like, you're going to play in our spot for our boys. And we're like, okay, yeah, it sounds cool. And then we literally showed up in this, I don't know what the neighborhood was, but they had like a gang headquarters slash like band headquarters. And one of the coolest things I ever seen was that Cold as Life had a map with pins in it where they've played. It was like
That's
for
cool.
us, we were all like, not just we're friends with them, but we're also still like enamored by it. So we're like, holy shit, they're mapping out, like, and they still were very involved with printing their own merch, mailing their own merch. Like they didn't let the other people handle it. And they had that chick Ramona who would later go on to book a lot of shows. She was working for Cold as Life at that time, and I just thought of like Cold as Life as like the most DIY thing possible because they had this like building where they had their band practice, they had all their merch organized, they had a fucking map, and yet they were like literally serious. Like, hey man, oh, you don't have a show? Cool, come play in front of our friends. So we show up. They're like, no, don't worry about gear. You guys can use our shit. And we played on Cold as Life shit in front of their friends. And it's one of the more intimidating things because obviously, like, I think I was 21. I think some of the guys were like 19, 18, and they're like, all right, this is a little extra. And then we hung out at their house and shit, and it was great. But like, instead of saying like, oh, Cold as Life is us, these crazy people, that's how much they kind of gave a fuck. Like, no, you're still gonna have a show. Like, you come play for us. Like, they didn't want us to be without a show that night. And then like you stay at their house, and next thing you know, they're either cooking breakfast or we're all gonna go to this diner together. And there's a camaraderie that came from that. And I think it's because even though we were years younger than those guys, they related back to that we were doing the same thing they were. So we always had a really good connection with the Detroit guys. And still, I mean, even like years later, we would do shows at Shadow Realm. Them guys would still be out hanging out at shows. You know, it's always been cool to be able to go to some town where you like the band that everyone knows and you're cool with that band. But it was actually even more special because Cold as Life weren't just like weird characters that people dream up because they see the big pictures with all the pipples. They were legitimate hardcore fans and they were legitimate humans. And that even went further when Jeff would be on tour with Ramallah and you get to hang out and drink coffee and hang out with him every day and just like realize like how much of a real ass human these people were, which kind of gets lost in today's hardcore internet world where they just like kind of characterize bands by like the imagery on their CDs. And it's like, nah, man, like Jeff and them dudes knew so much about hardcore punk, you know, and there was so much. There's so, and you know, actually, it's interesting. I started booking Negative Approach like almost 9, 10 years ago, and they came back, and those guys are some of the realest motherfuckers as well. Like Harold, everyone, like you know, they're just the most cool, easy breeze guys. Like, hey, you want to play an after show? Yeah, hell yeah, man. We'll play. You know, like them guys are just a great example of like hardcore at its very roots still existing in the present. And I don't have to tell you how like John's the most easy dude to deal with, like physically ever. The most like it's awesome.
Yeah.
Actually, you said casualties. I did casualties and I did casualties and Negative Approach at this venue that just is about to close, and it was one of the first shows we did there. And he was pissed off about the PA, and he looked at me. He's like, "This fucking PA's broke." I'm like, dude, you were playing shows in the 80s. He's like, he looked at me, he's like, fuck yeah, man. And like literally didn't give a fuck. And he's like, all right, didn't give a fuck, kicked the monitor off the stage and just kept going.
That's
Fucking
so
great.
good. Yeah, sounds like them. Yeah, there's a lot of fucking small places they played over the past 10 years since they've been together. Like, they did a free show back in like 2019 with Razzle Dazzle and fucking Cold World. It was a surprise show. It was free. They had free pizza, free everything. And then the surprise band was Negative Approach. So you got to see Never Ending Game, Negative Approach, Cold World, and Razzle Dazzle all for free. Like, what's
Yeah,
better than that?
that was Vice people hooking up with Cold World. And
Is that what
just
it was?
like
Okay.
yes, because they did a Philly thing here. I didn't do the show, but it was very similar. And I mean, Cold World not playing so much, it's very cool when they're able to play.
Yeah.
So, and I saw that flyer and was like, that is like the greatest of, you know, I'm always a fan of continuity. So, like, I know would sound weird, like Razzle Dazzle. I wish they would have put a Lenny's band or someone from, you know, Earth Mover just to tie them all in. But I feel like
Yeah.
that working class stuff that's in Detroit is present in Boston, it's present in Philly, it's present in a lot of places, and it's why our bands are more chill about things, you know, like more down to earth about it. So it's badass to see that it still exists and that John would be like, "Fuck yeah, we'll play," because that's how they
Yeah.
would. They don't. Them guys are great to deal with.
Yeah. It's always exciting. But sorry, the first time I've ever seen any of your bands, like I think Punishment was already done by like 2005, right? Like you're already doing the Shattered
Yeah,
Realm thing.
I had to make a choice in 2004. Ironically, I was going to have my second child and decided to go on tour of Punishment one more time and make a go of it just because, and that was actually Blacklist's first US tour. So we took a grip of our friends beyond just the normal amount of people who take on a tour between the two vans. And that was like supposed to be like, all right, guys, it's gonna be my last tour. I gotta grow up. You know, I'm only 23, turning 24. And I got a phone call from Shattered Realm. Hey, we get this tour set up and we don't have a singer. And I turned them down the fall before that. Like Punishment, Shattered Realm. Punishment had toured with Ringworm. Punishment and Shattered Realm actually fucked up. We played a lot of our shows together. 2002, our van fell apart and our band fell apart. We canceled the Punishment Shattered Realm tour, which was our first US tour. In 2003, Shattered Realm canceled doing the Punishment Ringworm tour we were all going to do together. And I got home from that tour and I thought Punishment was dead. Our van caught on fire. We had to get someone to drive out and pick us up and take us home. And dudes flew home. It was a miserable way to end. And I got a call, hey, do you want to join Shadow Realm? We're going to Europe. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I'm going back to work. I'm kicking ass. I'm fucking happy. And then that was September. In June, I got a phone call as the tour was starting. dude, we need somebody. He's not doing this tour. And I was kind of already on a fuck it mode, like, well, fuck it, I don't care. All right, yeah, I'll do the tour. And that, so I started touring with Shattered Realm in 2004. And I basically did a couple shows as punishment in Shattered Realm, like doubled up. And the drummer that we took on the tour joined Blacklisted. And then that's when we're like, you know what, let's not do punishment for a while.
Yeah, fucking. Well, I was gonna say the first time I ever seen Shattered Realm, I think it was April of 2005 with I believe it was Death Before Dishonor and Ramallah, maybe
Yeah, that was a
Suffocate
great,
Faster.
that was a
Or,
tour. That was a great tour.
yeah, that's fun. Scary shit. Because I had heard about you. You know, you hear about Joe Hardcore. You know, the FSU shit. So I was like, I'm finally gonna fucking see this band. You know, with a Death Before Dishonor, and I knew who a White Trash Rob was. You know, with Ramallah, I knew he was in Blood for Blood before that. And I just remember like, you know, because I was still 17 at the time, and like, you know, I think that was one of the first shows that they actually searched the people coming in. For some reason, some of them they never searched anybody, but when you guys played, they decided to search everybody that night. And I just remember, like that was really one of the first like most violent shows I've ever been to. Just you know, the crowd, everyone acting fucking crazy, and you know those bands can really get everybody riled up. And that's the first time I ever seen like crowd killing for the most part, like people just getting fucking dropped and fights afterward and like during. And I was like, holy shit, this is really something else, man.
That tour, that kind of followed a lot of the shows that we did on that tour. Was pat downs, people really crewed up, a lot of tense moments, but everybody in those bands, you know, Suffocate Faster from uh, Cincy, those guys are Courage Crew, and then the rest of us were all in FSU at the time. Everybody had such a good time on the tour. You know, like I've been best, like really, Brian Dertroit is honor is like one of my best friends. It's one of my closest friends. Been friends with him since I started doing Dysphoria tours, like we talked about earlier. So, and then the fact that we get to tour with Ramallah, which meant hanging out with Rob, and Ramallah was Mike from Toledo, who has been in a shit ton of bands like Premonitions of War. It was Timmy, who played drums in Cold as Life, and obviously Jeff on guitar. Like we were just excited to be around. It was like a great tour to be around all of our friends. So we were having the time of our lives every moment of the show, after and before. And then our sets were fun but tense because shit was popping off in the crowd. At sometimes it'd be us, sometimes it'd be during Death Before Dishonor, sometimes Suffocate, sometimes with Ramallah. Like you never know what crowd was going to be the one that popped shit off.
Yeah, and to be honest, like, that's what really, really, what it's like. I dived in head first into hardcore, just the fucking chaos. You know, to be honest, that's what I love the most. You know, the fights, like getting in fights, just having a good time. You know, like getting hit in the head by someone you didn't know. You know, really made you feel alive at a young age. Like this is fucking great. And you know, some people disagree with the violence and you know the aggressive male shit, but that's a lot of people are drawn to it, and I was one of those people. You know.
No, there's a lot of things that can be said where to modern parlance is to attack toxic masculinity, but there is there's two sides to that coin. The first side is that a lot of the people that found hardcore had a lot of pent up aggression and rage, and there's way more of a positive outlet. And what I look at is like, hey man, this is mutual. This is a mutual understanding when you go into a show, like we were talking about the like you know the styles of moshing and stuff earlier. There's a cadence to how shows work, and occasionally people get upset and there's going to be fights, and that's part of the situation that we've all accepted at a certain time. And to attack it as you know stupid is just trying to like I don't know armchair quarterback or just put shame on something that you don't agree with. I've always found that some of the people that found shows at that age needed it. The same way I think that's people who find straight edge at a certain age, they need it. And you know, for us, the issues wasn't the pit problems. It was like first the skinhead violence, you know, us versus the Nazis out here, later the crew shit. That escalated violence in a direction that it probably was beyond what the capabilities of hardcore to contain it was. But as you go back all the way to the very, very beginning, and something that I've been doing more often, There's always been violence. There's always been violent dancers. There's always been people known in the pit with crazy names for moshing. And so it's just a part of culture that we are having unhinged people with fucked up backgrounds, or let's use the modern term, neurodivergent brains. And
Right.
now we are in an atmosphere where all of our miscreant, crazy brains are accepted and we get to go off. And that release keeps us from having more problems elsewhere. So I've always supported it until there became like this small, I call it like the baby pool crew shit, where it was like the smaller crew, young kids were targeting people that weren't really like, we fought grown men, we fought bouncers, we fought skinheads. You know, I don't really like to believe that we ever really punched down. And when it started happening in Philly with our younger guys, it was kind of like, hey, come on, like we
Yeah.
don't want to be the problem. Like, don't punch down. You want to punch up,
Yeah.
and I counter that with, I don't think that the never ending game world of today would be able to exist in the same insane, supportive, a million kids coming and shows getting bigger and hardcore bands be able to get to do more if the violence was at the level it was then. Because the kind of people that find themselves supporting and loving hardcore now, never been punched in the face, don't want to get punched in the face, don't really take kindly to getting hit at all. And to the point where if you go to a show, you see kids in climbing to every spot ever to not get hit. And it's kind of, that's the unfortunate consequence of the moshing getting harder, is less people being up in the front, less people being in the pit, because everybody's swinging very fucking hard. Some of these kids are moshing harder than ever, I think, also because there is not a lot of crew shit and consequences. So they're putting violence on people with no consequence. So there is some bad to it, but it's an interesting dichotomy between the support and like love of this violent moshing that kids have now, and not actual true violence of actual fights.
Yeah.
Whereas in our world, it was hit and be hit. Who cares if you got in a fight? You could kind of rub it off. Now anything that happened goes directly on the internet. And maybe the internet is possibly a symptom of why things changed. But yeah, it was a crazy time. And that show specifically had a great energy because that room was long and skinny. So there wasn't a lot of places for people to hide. So there wasn't really a lot of places where someone could stand comfortably. And it was also a juxtaposition of a lot of older people there for some of the bands. They could see what crowds, the younger kids in sweatpants and, mosh shorts were there for the Suffocate Fasters. Dead Before Dishonor and Shadow Realm had, a similar crowd. The balance of it was pretty cool for that show.
Yeah. Yeah. Which it takes us towards, you guys came through twice that year. I don't know who the second tour was with. Oh,
Second tour was the Donnybrook.
yeah, Donnybrook, Hoods, Shattered Realm, and Black My Heart, the
Yeah,
Street Brutality tour.
yeah, that was
Which
nuts.
that fucking show, which we were just talking about, like the crew shit and punching down. That's one of the times where I really got checked, because me and my friends used to be like real assholes to people, honestly punching down, like, sort of like what I would say, like, yeah, Cobra Kai attitude, all of us, we're the tough guys, we'll fuck you up in numbers type of thing, which now I look back, it's completely ridiculous and rude to be that bully. But it's one of the times something happened with this kid, and it led to fists outside during that show. I don't know what band was playing, you guys were already over, but so this kid got fucking beat up, and all because it's my friend, I'm not going to say his name, obviously. He said he had said something about his girlfriend, which isn't a reason to fight. Like, you guys were fighting for the right reason, like Nazis and crazy people. But I got checked after this kid got beat up by like one of the older dudes. He fucking grabbed me from like the back of my shirt. Like, what the fuck are you doing? I was like, he's talking shit. He's like, so fucking what? What are he talking shit? I don't know. I'm sorry. That's why this kid's laying in the street. He got beat up for no fucking reason. Come to find out, it was the wrong kid. He didn't deserve to get beat up. Like, we just followed him out to his car, for just some stupid shit. And that's one of the times I feel the worst about. But it happens, I guess. But if it was my son today, everybody would be dead, you know?
I find that when we were younger, we were unhinged, and there's a support network that isn't always sane because it's like, oh, well, this is my friend, so he can't be wrong. And that's a contrast to when we were growing up. The guys that I came up under were very crazy people. And a lot of old skinhead dudes, punk rock guys, dudes that are in the band Bad Luck 13, and guys that hung out with Bad Luck 13. And some of these guys are just punk rockers that were just crazy. Other of these guys were like actual street gang dudes whose outlet was hardcore or grew up in like legitimate skinhead bands and grew up in the legit crazy shit because of the area that we're from and the kind of violence that was already accepted between hardcore people and skinheads. So there was a interesting learning curve, what we could do, what we shouldn't do, juxtaposed against a hardcore scene that was very much like close to being more of like what the modern hardcore scene would be. A lot of straight edge people, a lot of vegan people, a lot of the more popular stuff was getting big here, and we were following the more goon shit that was like outside of Philadelphia. It's like Punishment actually was Freight Train, but I think Freight Train was a band from our friends, our buddies Frontline, and then Punishment were like the heavy bands, or our friends Kensington, but they were not as heavy as Punishment, not like straight up as goony as we were. We're kind of like the first like goon thing, and that didn't happen until 2000. So for years, there was a balance between you're allowed to punch these people, you're not allowed to punch these people, and there was always a smack in the head or what the fuck is your problem from the old people, like, dude, come on, man. And you
Yeah.
kind of like fuck, I can do it here, but I can't do like there was a there it was actually sometimes easier to be the younger guy and not have to make calls and decisions. And then as cruise shit grew in the early 2000s, there was a window where if you're with your friends, you're whatever your friend's doing is right because that's your friend. And that had to come to an end. And you could look back in hindsight and go, well, yeah, I mean, but that's a ball that rolls out of control. But every ball comes to a stop at some point, not for everybody, but for individuals. And one of the best things that happened here was that we started really reeling in people that we were friends with that were taking advantage of being like, well, I'm with this core group, so I can get away with this. We try to pull that you can get away with this behavior out because we saw it kind of getting misused.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely people that have gotten beat up that shouldn't have. There was definitely violence that gone past the point where now, in hindsight, me being 40, not in my mid 20s, I would have said, yeah, this makes total sense. We're not like, does this make sense? What are you saving? But you have to, it's also important to understand that what hardcore shift happens in the scene also happens with regular people in regular life, people in general. I was great. I was kind of raised where if you had a problem with somebody, and this isn't like when I was 12 and 13, I'm talking like 8, 9, 10, you would go out and fight your next door neighbor. Like the parents were like, yeah, these two kids are talking shit about each other. Might as well have them fight and get it over with. So you have that. We were raised to hit back if we were hit. You were raised at not punching someone if they hit you. You weren't like there was no teachers conference for a fight. Like there was none of that.
Right.
So we were indoctrinated into mutual combat. We were indoctrinated to hit them harder than they hit you. And
Yeah.
that kind of concept's
Just swing
not
first.
yeah, and that concept is not really prevalent in today's hardcore scene by the people that how they were raised, how their parents raised them, and that's why you don't see that same kind of stuff exist now.
Yeah. 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 And the kind of shit that I went through where I ended up being like an asshole, to some people. Like it's like going to high school and middle school and high school and shit. You know, I was never like a cool guy. So, there's like certain like jocks and other people who would like fuck with me because the way I look or whatever. And I never really stood up for myself, until I actually started going to like punk and hardcore shows and realized there was like friends that like had my back. And then I would still end up going to high school where like the same people would like want to talk shit or whatever, but they would just get checked, like I'd finally step up to them like, what do you want to do? When I would just normally walk away or, and just let them talk their shit. But then after going to hardcore shows and meeting certain people that would tell you, hey, go hit this fucking guy, I got your back, to where it just became like a free for all. And then so there's people who, you know, who I would eventually basically, get a revenge in a sense on, because I knew that I could handle my own. It's some sort of weird confidence, but eventually that spiraled out of control from being bullied to becoming, a bully in a sense, which is a lot of people that would agree. But I'm a different man now,
Well, it's we all have to grow, and you have to make mistakes to grow. And you know, if you wanna, you could sit back and look at everything you did bad and worry about it. And I think that what you said is a major trope of what gets people in the hardcore is no one feels accepted in the regular world for the most part. So this side parallel universe of hardcore allows us to feel like we have our own police. Um, and dude, there's people that I'm friends with that might have been the hardest mosher at a show, soft as shit in real life. There's people that early on that were like in some of the crew shit, tough at shows, real shit pops off, they're not there for it. There's certain people that go to hardcore show for release. There's a certain people that go to shows that is more of like a religious experience. I know that may sound a little silly, but culturally, hardcore shows is very much in part of like what a religion would do. And me and Richie put me onto this, and I really absorbed it into how I look at it because it makes total sense. And so our culture has some of that, and I think that over time, the bad elements and the bad things have really been whittled out, and good people like yourself, and I can't call myself a good person, but I can say that I learned a lot about what to do right by how many times I've done wrong, and not repeating those wrongs and moving forward and try to efficate to people that you can not have to do these things and still be cool has kind of given me a chance to feel better about the dumb shit that we did. And so I don't feel like hardcore is a weird place. There are times when it's absolutely necessary and it doesn't happen. There's times where it's absolutely not necessary and happens. And you really can't do too much about it but go shrug your heads and go, is what it is. And we will learn from it. And I have so many friends who have changed their lives through hardcore. And so many people that have changed their lives and moved on. They don't go to shows, but they still have such a beautiful like love and respect for their time in hardcore that I feel that specifically we can't sit here and go back and forth and worry, oh, well, there was this time, because there's been 1,000 times and you never
Mhm.
know. With the exception of when someone has extremely bad violence, like life-changing situations, like people have been stabbed and beaten very badly, which is such a small percentage. Like it wouldn't even make up 1%. That's the other thing is like there is this moment in hardcore where people are like, oh, that was such a violent error, but it's like, yeah, I got my shit popped out. I got my fucking eye smashed in, but that
Mhm.
was par for the course. Very few times have people gotten like life threatening injuries. And, you know, we're also the culture that kind of laughs when someone kicks you in the mouth from a stage dive. And, I've watched it as this hardcore over the last 16 years where younger kids that you wouldn't even think could take it, like these small, like, little girls, and I see them, their whole fucking eyes black. I'm like, you're right. They're like, oh, I'm so excited to still be here. And I'm like, what?
Not at the
Like putting
hospital.
fucking
We're good.
yeah. So we also need to understand that this culture, even without the violence, there's some crazy shit that happens. We ought to tell people who broke their wrist and broke their elbow, hey, you can't stage dive tonight. Especially the earlier venue, it was so much harder. And you had these kids with these fucking looks like Vietnam or World War II bandages on their heads, still trying to sing along, and you're like, Jesus Christ. So I guess the best way to say it is that violence and injuries are two separate things, but the people are pretty resilient. And there's a lot that hardcore has grown from. And I think we needed that growing pains of what that shit was. And as long as you're not masturbating to those times where like, yeah, remember that time I did that? Then
Right.
you're a sane human and you've grown from it.
Yeah.
And the people that haven't had growth from it, their regular life is fucking fucked up. And unfortunately, almost everybody I know, be it the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, have all grown because that's another thing is that life in hardcore has given us growth.
Yeah. For sure. I agree. And it goes part of growing is, I had a friend, this was probably like 2008, 2009, who was straight edge as long as I knew him. And, right, who he had overdosed on Suboxone.
Age of Hate 56 and all the digital media that exists, you can have a pretty normal life and still be cognizant and to some degree a supporter of hardcore and not put your feet in the door threshold of an actual hardcore show. So there's a balance. But for others, like I get up in early in the morning. I get my things together to go to work. I put podcasts on while I'm at work most days. And I don't really talk about hardcore music, hardcore punk with any of my coworkers. I do have the nickname hardcore on a lot of jobs, usually because guys start looking into my social media, and the company I worked with the longest, they're like, oh yeah, hardcore. That's how they refer to me. Oh, that's Joe. Like it subsequently follows me, but not by my own intention. I don't sit there and go, oh, just to let you know, I'm Joe Hardcore. No, that doesn't exist. In fact,
No.
I there's a lot of my own life that I don't discuss in the lunch break when we have shared lunch. And there's a lot of stuff that's just me, and hardcore punk is one of those things that's just mine. And it's something that stays with me. But I feel that there are people within hardcore who never find a balance in the other regard. And it's such all of their lives that they might wake up on the wrong side of whether it's 30, 40, 50, and be like, fuck, I don't have anything else together for myself. And you got to find a balance. And some of that balance is going all in on a business, which is where I got the podcast ideas from, to talk to people that can manage to be in a punk rock life while, still being a business person. And that's not everybody I speak with, but there's a fascination finding skills and opportunities and all these things that come from hardcore that are now the basis for how you survive, which is a very punk rock thing in itself. So you are like many people I know that had deficiencies in control and you had to get your life together. But here you are, your life's together. You're back in the game.
Fuck
And
yeah.
that's the other part of it. It's just like starting off. Like I read a lot of self-help stuff because I don't have always the best track record for staying on point with things. The one thing I always like to say, which is something I'm repeating, it's not my own, is that every day is the opportunity to start or to start again. You did something 5 days, you stopped it on 6, 7. Well, then day 8, do it again. You can get back into it. And hardcore is the same way. And I have friends who are in their 40s checking out bands that are brand new. I have friends who are in their 50s that are checking out bands that are brand new. Like there's always going to be a relationship to the scene and the culture. And it also was in part because the culture of what's now still has a relationship to the past. You see it a lot in the Revelation stuff that's still getting re-released. And now in the world of podcasting, there's all these old times from people are going back. And, there's a lot of different ways that we could still interact with hardcore and still maintain the 40-hour job and the good family.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of funny how I got like reinvigorated. Like, I always watched the Hate 56, shit on YouTube and all. And I always checked out the new releases, bought the merch, but I really wasn't showing up at shows. But until it was a holiday, I don't know what holiday it was, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. I just, it was just YouTube was on my TV, and it was when when Blood for Blood did This Is Hardcore, I think 2017.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like my whole family was over, and I was just sitting in there like watching it quietly while people were eating dinner, and my brother-in-law was sitting there with me. And you know so he just started asking questions like this place is fucking crazy, and like somebody got punched like in the pit, and he just thought like what kind of shit is this? Like he had no idea that it was the shit that I used to go to, or still did, here and there. But I started like explaining it to him, and then I ended up taking him to a show, which was Terror, Backtrack, and Harm's Way at the Sanctuary in Detroit, just because he thought the videos were, fascinating, in the crowd and people, stage diving and shit like that. He was 28 years old, So for him to discover that at such an older age, in my opinion, 28 years old, normally you find out when you're a teenager, see, it was able to like bring me back to like how exciting it was for me, and like actually what I had missed out on the past few years. And so he started getting into the shit. So I showed him what was up, and now he's all in, man. It's just good to do for somebody. Like, hey, this is what I do. So now somebody else gets to do it at 30 years old now.
Especially with the internet, the interaction times have shifted greatly. And I'm I'm in a short list of people that were going to shows before they were old enough to drive, consistently. And I got lucky because of the transit system and the people around me, like we talked about. But I find that more and more often it's people who were introduced the way you're speaking on, or they have the internet or 856 or Spotify and all these internet algorithms that put you down this wormhole. And I've done this with other things that I'm now into in the opposite regard. Like I found things through YouTube and I'm like, oh my God, I got to do this. This is so cool. So I can relate to people who are finding things in the now. And I find that the best way to stay excited about this music is to not be around people your own age all of the time as you get older. And I have friends that are literally, one of my best friends is Hard Carl, who put out the Turning Point records and fucking, was the guy who brought tattooing back to DC and has all these great stories from the 1980s. But, Bob Wilson and us all hanging out together, Carl is now super excited about some of these younger bands just because he's like, oh man, this is cool that this is back. And the youth then reinvigorates us because everything is new to them. So then you're excited for them, you know? And I find that the best way to stay excited about hardcore is to not feel like you know everything, and to be excited just for the simple things that come back, or support people when you yourself aren't really, I put on shows sometimes because I want to see young bands and see if, like, am I crazy? Is this band good? And a great example is that Wild Side band. Bob showed them to us, and I didn't go to jiu-jitsu that night, which is something I never do, just to see them. And it's like you get excited about new things, and ironically in hardcore, it's like new things that sound like the old things that you love. And so there's a cycle that will always continue, which is where the Peter Pan thing continues for some, and where people can step in and out of it as they need a lot easier. The internet's made it 1,000 times easier to be interactive and stay cognizant of who's what and what's going on without ever having to touch a show, which has its benefits and its detracting points. But I think ultimately the benefits outweigh, you know?
For sure, man. Yeah, it's a good thing, like you said. It doesn't matter what age, you can see it on YouTube, or you can continue supporting bands by like buying their merch, or the $3 Bandcamp stream, whatever else. It all affects the bands either way, and it's good to have your hand in it still.
Well, like hardcore Bandcamp is not unlike the SoundCloud in the regards of how people find music and how bands are spread. And so for me specifically, I find myself constantly on Bandcamp when a band's mentioned on the internet. With Twitter moves so fast, Instagram, being able to check out new bands weekly is kind of sometimes over. I won't say it's exhausting, but it's oversaturation. Like I can't catch up on everything. But in the same time, it just shows you the level of how quick everything's moving because of the internet, because of the involvement, because of the engagement that's coming from these algorithms. It's like Have Heart was a decent sized band when they broke up, and not something to be like, oh, they weren't even known. But it was Bridge Nine's back catalog with the algorithm that it had that would get all these newer fans that are not like hardcore people. So when they end up playing a 10,000 person first show back, it's like, yeah, because all of Have Heart's fans, I'd say less than 800 of the people that were at the 10,000 were like legit dyed in the paint hardcore people, because they got exposed to an entire generation the minute that Spotify and YouTube began suggesting algorithms that would put them in that path. So it's AI, internet has all kind of given a second and third wave to some of this. And then also there's a lot of organic stuff. My friend Ryan re-released Turning Point. So I said, hey, it's a good time for you guys to play. It took a lot of me twisting arms to get them to do it. That show that they did 4 years ago, which going on 5, boom, entire resurgence of people loving Turning Point. And then now there's bands like One Step Closer, which directly are influenced by Turning Point. And now Turning Point's release is finally going to get released re-released on Revelation. And this happens all the time, the modern day of veganism and young kids being into the heavier stuff. Earth Crisis, we actually put them on a fest in a spot that I was like a no lose for them. Like, if people, we booked them in 2012 and they had a decent set, but it wasn't like the chaos that we were hoping for. So we put them in a decent spot in a 2016 or 2017 set. And that was one of the best sets I've ever seen at This Is Hardcore, because of the younger kids that have been growing into who they are and are super into metalcore and veganism and all this heavy stuff. And it was just by luck, Earth Crisis had this set that made them so happy. So one of the things that I love about this is, through doing shows and doing the things that I do, I get young kids excited about old bands, and I get old bands reinvigorated by these young kids that want to support them, be it Maximum Penalty. I cannot believe that we did Alone in the Crowd. They only played one show ever. And unfortunately, because of Howie and his brain tumor situation and needing to have surgery, we were able to do Alone in the Crowd. And there's a ton of bands now that kids are into, I think, partially because of what was talked about around the time of those shows, so the exposure of the new stuff to the old people, and likewise the old stuff to new people, is a huge reason why hardcore is not going to die in this internet age.
Yeah, I love it. And every year, since 2006, I've seen the This Is Hardcore Fest, and every year I just want to kick myself in the ass. I say, yeah, I'm gonna go see all these bands, whether it's a reunion or not, and I never make it out, man. But just this past year, 2020, I had an Airbnb booked and a car booked in like fucking February. I was coming. I had everything planned. I'm fucking going finally. I didn't know what bands were playing or nothing. And then the whole shit just shut down. The 1 year. I was like, motherfucker.
I find that if I wasn't me, I probably would have been at 2 or 3 This Is Hardcores ever if I didn't live in Philadelphia.
Right.
It's harder to do those things. It's very fucked up to be the person that puts on something like this. And yet, like, again, I pour concrete for a living. I got other things that I do in nature of it. And I feel bad that I don't support every other fest in the physical presence, but there's only so much time and money, especially when This Hardcore is a 4-day show now. Next 2021, it'll probably be what we did last time, which is like a show beforehand at a smaller venue and 3 shows or whatever. But it doesn't, that's a lot of my lifetime. It sounds dumb, but like, I now have like an organized schedule, like T-minus 60 days out, 30 days out, a week out. There's different things that got to be in place. And then because I do this sword fighting shit, I usually there was years where I would take like 3 weeks off. It'd be like the fest, I'd be off for it. And then I would take 2 weeks off to do the sword fighting. So now I do 2-3 days before the fest, I'm off of work. And then I go back to work for 2 or 3 days. And then I take a week or so off to do sword fighting out in Pennsylvania. And that's like a lot of my vacation. There's only 1 year, it was like 3 years ago, where I took another week of vacation and went to Maine with my wife. And I've had more This Is Hardcore related time off than I've ever had a vacation in my real life, especially with touring being over. The time is limited and the resources are still limited. I'm not balling out here. And so I relate completely to what you're saying, in that, it's fucked up. We're about 4 or 5 days away from the last festival I was at, which was FYA. Bob had been doing that for years. And that's like, that's my protege. It's like my little brother. It's the first time I actually got to go to it for the same thing. So I relate heavily to what you're saying. Like, it looks awesome. Love that you do it. I have never been there.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought for sure FYA was going to happen amongst all the shit, man. I was like,
I was bullying him and bullying him and bullying and bullying and bullying and bullying him to do it. And he, like a lot of promoters, doesn't want the Twitter smoke of people like, how dare you put this on? You're going to kill
the world,
every person. And so he doesn't want to do it. And I relate to that. I mean, there's a lot of investment. What people don't understand is with a show, you have to rent the venue. Sometimes in his position specifically, there's got to be a deposit that's made. There's a lot of business that has to be done in the promise that a show happens and that the money is going to be there. So there's an uncertainty that comes from the next year or two of shows. And you're going to see some bands balk at wanting to do things without a promise of definite, this is what it's going to be. There's got to be back, we got to get back to the flow of things to know the trust. I'm under the belief that a show that would do like 1,200 persons might do 600 now. I
Like
don't know how.
today.
Yeah, just because you never know who's going to show up, even with the vaccine and all the what ifs. I don't even like talking about the what ifs, but the what ifs
Yeah.
are that things are uncertain, and some people are going to still not be comfortable going, and it's going to take somebody getting the lumps in their face and online people like this guy's a piece of shit. He's not, and blah blah blah. I have friends who think the opposite. They're like, oh my god, when everything comes, it's going to be so much better. No, there's a shit ton of bottlenecking. There's bands who haven't played in years. There's going to be so many bands playing on top of each other. It's kind of like if you kept a bunch of ravenous wolves in a cage without food. All these bands that like live off of touring are all going to want to on tour. And so on a promoter situation, there's 1,000 bands that are all going to be coming at the same time. And I think it's going to be feast or famine. You know, I don't think that it's going to be as good as it was solely because so many people are not going to work together to make sure they're not working on top of each other. And juxtapose that with, though they were going to pass the bill, they haven't done it. That includes $15 billion, which is something like we talked about on my podcast with Tim Moore. NEVA, which is National blah, blah, blah Venue Association, lobbied correctly with the government to get money for the small venues. There was $15 billion in the recent bill that would pass would help these venues, but there's already small venues lost, which directly affects hardcore. And you're gonna see a lot of change. So I don't really know. I was hoping that Bob was gonna be the first one to do FYA. Part of me still wanted to go to Tampa, Florida, and just party at the Goth Night for 3 days. And but in regards to it, I don't know how it's gonna work when it comes out. The parameters aren't set, but I feel like there's going to be a level of stupidity and not working together to force all these shows to happen all at once. Like the minute this is all back, we have to get back out there. And I don't think it's going to make shows bigger. I think it's going to make people fight for a space. And I think that there needs to be a balance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my feeling. Sort of like my prediction. I wanted to be positive and think that all these bands are just exactly just gonna go jump on tour, and there's gonna be the three of your favorite bands and eat in your city every night. But that's where I was thinking. I was like, so do you want to go see Agnostic Front over here, or if Terror over there, or whatever else at the next venue? But that also takes away from the crowds and their support to earn the money that they deserve on tour. So I don't know. I just hope that it can all be figured out to where they're not on top of each other in the major cities where they know they're going to have a big crowd, because it'll be a third of the crowd if there's three bands there the same night. Hopefully it could be some sort of coordination.
The worst show that I've had recently that was pretty ass, and it wasn't even in my ass. It's like should have been an insane, even more insane show. A lot of people went to see Black Sabbath the same day we did Madball, and that was kind of like, I'm overseeing shit like Black Sabbath unless it's you want to get me to see something crazy, it's got to be Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
That's because Iron Maiden comes so limited. But one of the things that I do, which is not usually what promoters do, is I often tell booking agents when they start asking for holds, like, hey, by the way, this also is in the area. So when you're asking for the way a show gets booked, for those listening, is that you get an email from certain agents who are asking for a stretch of dates. Very few times the band want a target date specific. They go, hey, this is a stretch we're thinking about, because you got to remember is they're booking 30 days. So they need a sliding window for each area, because one venue in Baltimore may not be able to work on this day. So they want the flexibility before they iron out and then unfortunately for the world of promoters and bands, because they have to fucking drive farther, some agents only go to the places where the money is bigger. And I've watched tours look so dumb because someone's going to go from point A to point B to point C, which is almost like a fucking U, because the money's bigger than doing it linearly. where it would be easier for the band and drive time and gas and all that. So that being said, is I often, when I see tours coming too close together, I communicate it, and sometimes they work around it and sometimes they don't. I'm not a big promoter. I do good hardcore shows, but doing good hardcore shows is such a small thing. And with the corporate world involved in music and owning venues, more and more of our space is going to be limited to the bands that want to play a hardcore show and they're not looking for something else. And at my stage of where I'm at in my life and with the shows, the bands that work with me because I have a name that I've built over the last 23 years. I do my best, and sometimes I don't get the band. Sometimes they go to the rock club. Sometimes they play in front of the barricade. I used to get really upset by this. And then I learned, they'll come back. And they usually do. And the bands that don't come back, they never wanted to be here in the first place, and I shouldn't keep bothering with them. And that's kind of where I'm at with things. And I'm lucky that I have a decent relationship with a great amount of bands that I love to work with that allows me to keep doing shows. But I imagine there's always a world where at some point, whether through regulation or just by sheer want and need, these hardcore bands could tomorrow just bail out on the whole thing and just try to be something else. But the good thing is, for the ones that do that, there's a whole group of bands that are coming up. And that's when the older bands, which I love to deal with, don't want to work with me. I realize, oh, wait, now I have more time to focus on these bands, which I need to bring up so that they can grow. So there's a balance there.
Yeah. Just it's fucking a little bit depressing too. I'm sorry. I'm sure it's even worse for you. Booking the shows that took up a lot of your time. I'm sure, but so not even having any of that now, like something to look forward to, whether it's once a month or 3 times a month. Booking shows wise, it's just not there anymore. So do you just fill your time with work and jujitsu or?
Yeah, I what's interesting is that I have friends who probably spent every single day of the COVID talking about the lack of shows and how they don't know what they're going to do with their lives. And be it listening to Jocko Willink and other people, I just pivoted, man. Okay, cool. There's no shows or there's no shows coming through. Okay, I'm going to work on trying to make the fest happen, but I have all these other things I want to do. We were working all together on a house, which was for our friend. That was fun. I went back into union work when we were able to. I worked consistently every single day I can. Um, Jiu-jitsu was closed. It reopened on my birthday, which is July 4th. And we recently closed again a week and a half ago. But my body's sore. It's getting colder. So I look at this like, all right, a little time to get rest. I'm about to get my stomach tattoo finished. I find the things to fill my head so I'm not waxing for the moment that we have shows again because
Yeah.
they'll come. And I don't think they're over. And we've pivoted in a couple different directions. We've got a digital, this hardcore thing that we've been working on, but it seems like, as I said in another podcast, there was a time when we couldn't get people to do the digital thing. And so we were scrounging to get bands that we interested. Now the opposite is true. Now there's every band that said no are now just doing their own, which is fucked up because we asked them, but it is what it is. So in early 2021, we'll be releasing some form of our digital thing. I am actively working on the potential of what this hardcore could be because the person who was huge in getting us the venue at the Electric Factory, he died the Monday before COVID even was known to the world. And
Shit.
it was really hard. It's like losing a friend and a mentor and a big brother and a guardian angel that he is the buffer between the corporate entity that runs the venue now and making sure that we have the support we need it. And he's the ultimate final say in the stuff that we get to do. So we have this hardcore at the venue. So I cannot see us in good faith going back to that venue because I don't think that we'll have the same stewardship and support that we need to be at that venue. So I've been since March. I was hoping a little bit that we could keep it going, but then once everything closed, by like April or May, I realized there was going to be no this hardcore at the venue, and I'm not actively looking to return to the Electric Factory. And I look at it like I started this hardcore in 2006 in one room. That room is now a bunch of houses. The Electric Factory was still owned privately, and now it's owned corporate. It's time to find a new room, and move forward into the third phase of what this hardcore is.
Yeah, fuck. I don't know. I see all the Hate 56 videos there from all the. I'm like, I can't wait to go fucking go to that place, go crazy there. But oh well, it doesn't happen as long as I make it out eventually. You know, 'cause I love every band, especially 2017, dude. Like that was my favorite lineup I've ever seen. I don't know how you feel, but you had like you know Scarhead, Death Threat, fuck Madball, Blood for Blood. Well, your Mala did that set, Blood for Blood, H2O. I think Cold as Life, the other Cold as Life with Jesse singing, 100 Demons, all my favorite bands. and I was gonna ask you, so can you go ahead and spoil it and say any good bands that was gonna be there in 2020 that were unable to play? Oh no. Oh, I lost audio, sir.
We're not hearing him.
I can't hear you. Nope. Do you hear me?
I don't think it's on our end.
I hear you. All right.
I'm waiting for my audio to come back.
Great.
Can you hear me now?
You're good.
I'm in a weird spot that I can hear me talking, but I don't hear me in my own stupid headset. So I might just take that off as long as
Yeah.
you know you're recording and you're good.
Yep, we're recording.
Everything's
good. Yeah, we're fine, man.
Yeah, don't worry. We've ran the tests. Let me see. All right, I'm good. I'm actually in everything now.
Okay, sweet.
I don't know why that's shifted, and I'm not happy about that. I'll have to figure out where that went wrong. So we will start with the question. So I had this old guy band that I was most excited for, and actually it's set up the year before. I booked Keith's band off specifically because I thought that at some point Circle Jerks playing would be something that I would love to see. And I manifested it is the best way to put it. So by manifesting it, we got Circle Jerks to do their first East Coast show because they were going to do a shit ton of shows in 2020. They obviously canceled all of them, so we weren't going to have Circle Jerks. So that was like the big excitement stuff. And then I had a bunch of shit that I was working on. And I'm going to be honest with you, I did something I've never done before. And the minute that I knew we weren't going to have the fest, I completely deleted the file. And I also, like, out of my head, I got rid of any idea of what I was really working at just because the frustration was so fucking high.
Oh, I couldn't imagine.
Talking about 2017, there were so many of my own personal favorite bands. And that was the year that I spoke on with Earth Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I am happy that I have the ability to do these lineups and that every year someone says what you said. This is all my favorite bands. And that's all I want to do because I love all this stuff. And I see the intrinsic value and correlation to how all this music locks in, And so that same year that we did Buried Alive, we couldn't get Rob to perform as Blood for Blood there's all this weird bullshit legal stuff with the original singer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got Ramallah and we just put a Blood for Blood skull and he did all the songs. And there was always hope that we could do a real Blood for Blood. And that was probably the closest I've come was in 2020 to maybe having a Blood for Blood set. And to the point when I was driving in Ohio, I broke my hand at FYA, came home, worked in concrete, found out I needed to have screws put in my hand, was out of work and had to baby it for 6 weeks. And the week I returned to work, I went to drive to Ohio with a friend. The drive out there was the last conversation I'd had with my friend Brian, who would be the guy who died, who was the guy who really supported this hardcore, etc. But also we were talking with Blood for Blood about having them come back and how we can make that happen. And with this whole thing, I don't know if they'll ever be in the same stage. There's so many moving pieces with Blood for Blood that I'm not sure if they'd ever do it, because it's almost like you need everything to align for them to make it work. And I thought it would seem close, and that was something that we were working on. And then the minute COVID happened, I just knew, all right, anything possible is out the fucking window. And so it's kind of a disappointing aspect to it, but I was working on Blood for Blood.
Fuck. That is like, look, to be honest, out of all the hardcore shows I've ever been to, a lot of bands come through fucking Detroit over the past, 17 years. The two that I've never seen is Blood for Blood and Death Threat ever. And there's something happened, when a Death Threat had come through a couple times, but like, I don't know, something happened where I couldn't go or whatnot. And like, I was almost guaranteed to see them, almost, because it seems like they play almost every year. And the whole shit got shut down. I was hoping they would have played, even though there wasn't, any flyer released. I was gonna be hopefully either Ramallah or Blood for Blood and fucking Death Threat. Then my life would be complete.
Well, I feel like Death Threat had a long period where they toured, and then now they're in one of these great spots that bands get to where they don't need to tour, and they can just play shows. And I think that that's what's going to happen is some of the bands like Death Threats and all you will see, because people will be excited to start building these little bills back up. Um, I know festivals that are looking to just rerun the lineups that they announced for 2020. Sort of lucky that I had the flexibility where we weren't going to announce till May. So I had an incomplete lineup. But looking at what I would do versus other people would do, I'd say that I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere along the line the Midwest pulls Death Threat out and whatever comes after this, like whatever. I don't even know what the word you would call this. I hate everything about it. And the reason why I hate everything about it is because it's something every single person has to relate to in their own way. But with hardcore people, we're such first world problems. Like, I want to see this band. It's like, I have so many people in hardcore who are on the verge of being homeless, who don't have jobs. And yet I get to read on Twitter that some 25-year-old kid's upset that he might have to get a job and not tour for a living. And it's like, I don't know if your band that's playing for a couple hundred people a night is really what you would call a living. But that's the difference between a 40-year-old dude with a union job and a 25-year-old kid in a touring band. So I want shows to come back, but I want them to come back in the right manner. And when I say right manner, I just mean that I want them to come back without like this fucking fervent chaos that I hear when I hear about everybody, like the bottleneck that I see popping up as far as what getting tours together and shit.
Yeah. Who knows? Yeah. The ones you do feel bad for is like who the ones who actually do make a living, like, Scott Vogel and Freddie Madball and all them type of people who it seems like they're always constantly on tour, whether it's in the United States or in Europe. They spend a lot of time over there, and it just sucks really for them because they're like, well, to me, the superstars of like the hardcore bands, and they're always on tour, and then them not coming, is money out of their pocket for them, just to survive. Like,
No,
you
I
know,
agree. I not only do I agree, they're the exception to the rule because they've done it for so long, and their impact is so. I mean, Madball has songs in other languages. They, Terror, the same thing. Like, not with the languages, but they've touched everywhere in the globe.
mhm.
The globe. Like, the impact of their music has over time just quantified, like, and then you tell someone, they tell someone. It's like a positive pyramid scheme. I love that in 2020 I got to see Madball in front of a bunch of kids, and it was probably their first time seeing Madball and Killing Time. And that's the reason, again, why we put these old bands on these shows, these young bands, so the whole culture is exposed to each other. And so yeah, with the bands that depend upon a living and who have promulgated the hardcore lifestyle across the earth and it's given everything back, yeah, it sucks for them. But what I was getting at is more like some young kid who's in a band who just doesn't want to grow up yet. It's like, look, man, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people who are going through this. We need to think of more things that are more detrimental to real life than your band not touring. You know, there's people who's in their second or third generation businesses that are going to lose their family business. That's just crazy. Sad.
Yeah, it is
Let's talk
sad.
about more positive stuff. This is bum
Mo-
out.
More positive stuff. Oh, that's way off topic, but it's one thing I want to ask about you. I was just going through some hate 5-6 shit the other day, and I came across one's called the Fugitive.
Fuck yeah.
What is that? What the fuck is that shit?
All right. So that was in 2012. I believe, yeah, the year 2010. 2010, 11, 12. I think the first year we didn't do a promo was 2015. Sonny and I started linking up to do a promo. And in 2011 was the first like good one. And we did like a mini movie. And it was like nothing like the Fugitive. And then we had so much fun with that video that we actually made a 30, I don't know, was it 25 or 35-minute movie? And it's absolutely everything that if you ever were like, if you're ever concerned that I am like this super tough guy who just like only does certain things, the minute you see that video, all those things are thrown out. And we're just a bunch of silly bastards with a lot of dumb, too much time, and just did some really silly. It's a promotion movie that has nothing to do about this hardcore, but still encapsulates this hardcore. And then the year after that, we did. Oh fuck! You know what, dude? We did one in 2015. Maybe it was It was either 15 or 16. We did one. Oh, it was 16, and we did one, and it was making fun of the debates. And I was Donald Trump, and we had Aaron from Jesus Peace, and he was that guy Ben whatever from
Ben
Mission.
Carson
Yeah, it was Ben Carson.
sleeping in the corner. Yeah.
Yeah, we had someone being Bernie Sanders. Like, we've made a bunch of joke promos that are funnier than like, I never wanted to have a promo that sounded like a monster truck. Like, come check this out. This is hardcore. Like,
Yeah.
so. But at the same time, I just didn't want a straight down the middle promo. So we just did some really goofy shit. We did it in my house, and then me and Sonny kept one upping each other in stupid shit that we would have to do. And it went from, we just came up with a script that was sort of around Willy Wonka, but not really. And then it just kind of went into it's just like all bad plots. It went to different plots. So a lot of hardcore stars were involved in it. A lot of dudes from This Is Hardcore were involved in it. And we shot some of it at the house I was living in. I just rewatched it after a friend had said, "Why did you never tell me about this?" I'm like, because it was older. Like, we did it. That's all there is to it,
Yeah.
But I anything that's silly and fun, I would like to be involved in. And I grew up with Monty Python and Animal House and a lot of dark comedy, and I still really love irreverent parodies and just making fun of things. I think the best way to promote yourself is to not take yourself seriously
For sure.
and to make fun of yourself at all costs. And so, a lot of people talk shit, but no one is better than taking yourself down a notch than when you are making fun of yourself wearing a Willy Wonka costume.
I thought that shit was so fucking funny. But one of the questions I did have about that, did you actually put like tickets all around Philly, or is that just part of the plot, like in the info? Was there any tickets?
We had Sonny legitimately made those tickets, so the tickets were real, but the whole scene was staged.
Right.
What's crazy is in the opening scene is this little redhead kid who I had talked shit to and threw off the stage. And in the movie the year before had said I looked like a retarded Bobby Hill or something like this. Like, and I thought that was fucking the funniest thing ever. And so Sonny would give him like a legit airtime as like a DJ at a radio show. And that motherfucker doesn't go to shows no more. Or he doesn't go to the shows that we're involved in. It's like, look at your watch, like, damn, that was what was he gone in 4 years? Like, what the fuck? That kid was great. The
Yeah.
first one we did, we made fun of me and we made fun of This Is Hardcore. And so it was me asking bands to play, and on purpose, none of the bands wanted to play. And it was a lot of people being like, no, no, why would I do that? And then people making fun of This Is Hardcore. And part of that was like to make fun of the whole thing that was going on where we would sell out immediately. And so we would sell out this tickets. It went from like a couple weeks before the fest to 3 or 4 days to 36 hours to 12 hours. We were totally sold out. And then we started getting shit on people and from people like, fuck this guy, you know, blah, 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 which is why we moved to a bigger venue. For better or worse, This Hardcore has a beautiful look at that venue, and the AC and the accoutrements of being at a big venue was very cool. And we could never do the things that we need to do and become what we were without the big venue. But again, without Brian, we'll never do that again. And I think that the era of big This Is Hardcore is cool. And now we're going to shift into new This Is Hardcore. I don't know what that's going to be. But we needed to make fun at a level that we couldn't even surpass with a 10-minute video, because we put that video, the first one, out right before we went on sale and announced. So then when we did the Fugitive, we had a movie premiere for it. We rented a popcorn shit. Um, I think I was gonna get a. I don't remember if me and Sonny rented tuxes or not. I don't think we did, but we legitimately had popcorn and a movie screen, and we definitely showed both movies, the first one and the second. And then I made trophies up for me and Sonny, and we had someone come give us a bouquet of flowers as we talked after the movie was over, completely making fun of the whole joke was like, no one's going to care about this movie, so let's make a movie premiere. And we almost rented red carpet till we found out how much it costs to rent red carpets. Like,
Oh,
damn, it's
fuck.
expensive. But like the ostentatiousness of making fun of the parody that we were already making fun of is the kind of where you get lost in a loop of making fun of shit.
Yeah. I thought it was fun, to see, just a different side of Joe Hardcore himself, the tough guy with the tattoos, you throwing people off the stage, and then just to see, just make fun of yourself and take everything, kind of lighter, it's a good thing to see because, as you know, your reputation, throughout the years have had ups and downs, like the fucking tough, scary guy, Joe Hardcore, then to see it, you laugh at yourself is,
Well,
heartwarming.
I mean, you got to remember, and I say this like with the most sincerity. Um, there's a band called Tribe 13, which I talked about with at the Casualty show. They had a song called Joe Hardcore, and Lon, my boy, his vocal pattern is really like crazy. So it's like bada 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 oi 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 oi. You can barely hear half the shit he's saying because he's singing so fast. But that was like the pace of that band. And so being called Joe Hardcore was like a joke because I was like a young idiot with long hair and fucking just looked like a maniac. Didn't look anything like a cool hardcore person. And so it was a diss. It was a diss. It was like, yeah, fucking Joe Hardcore over there. And I think the song is kind of like making fun of like people who try to be too hardcore. And so it just was something that stuck. And then, you know, um, doing shows at a young age, everybody had a cool name. I had a shitty band that I don't even tell people the name of. And I would tell everybody, now we suck, we're not doing it. And so I've been Joe Hardcore for 25 years. Actually, no, 26 years now. And so um I had to put some things on your shoulders that were like, you gotta see pictures of me when I was 18, 19. I'm skinny as shit. I had my jaw broken. I was still moshing. I broke my jaw. I was drinking 40s through a straw. still moshing, but we were also carrying guns and smoking dust and beating people with fucking hammers and literally moshing with bricks in our school bags. And then, 5 years later, I'm in a national gang and I'm carrying guns and we're getting in trouble. And then 3 years after that, I'm wearing armor in the middle of Pennsylvania in a war. And people were like, "Oh, what the fuck are you doing? You're supposed to be this guy." And it's like, I was a lot of different things. I'm like the guy who booked shows and loved hardcore and read a lot of books, was obsessed with zine culture and learned so much about hardcore punk from zine culture. And to this day, when a new hardcore book comes out, I buy it. I own so many fucking books on hardcore punk. I both love this culture and did probably things to set this culture back. I never wasn't a nerd. I was exposed to a lot of book reading at a young age to the point where then later on I would get into mythologies and Dungeons and Dragons through my older cousin. Um, Played Dungeons and Dragons, played with a miniature game called BattleTech, and kind of shifted out of that world when I started getting really involved in hardcore. But none of that stuff left. And then it was only because of time and being away on tour and doing different shit and the people that I'm friends with doing different shit that I stopped linking up to play those kind of games, but still have such a crazy relationship to all that kind of stuff that yeah, like I might have been beating people up, but still was going home and could talk to you for an hour about Dungeons and Dragons or about Rome or Viking history. And then later, when all the cruise shit I was out on bail. I'm running this hardcore. About to be a dad for the third time. I'm taking care of my family. Yeah, I found sword fighting, and it was like an escape from my escape from my escape. you know, and I find that there are people who are who they are through and through. And I have letters. Like I still laugh at the dumbest stuff. And if anyone who's ever hung around me, I'm not biting on 16D nails and just giving people hard looks. I'm breaking my friends' balls so bad, and we're making fun of each other. And nothing is more fun than when someone makes fun of me. I find it to be the highest regard of respect when I get my balls broken. I never get upset. It's always like back and forth. And I grew up in and around people that broke balls. Being on a union job site, you get your balls broke about fucking everything. And you have to laugh at yourself and you have to be able to make fun of yourself. And the Joe Hardcore construct is easy to make fun of just by like, oh yeah, who does he think he is? So I wanted to even tear that thing like, oh, I'll do a better job at making fun of me than you can. And
Right.
that exists now to this point, it's a weird position to be in, to grow from a kid who just didn't want to be in the streets getting into real trouble to finding hardcore to get into real trouble, to being off the streets and having a real job and having a career in union construction, but still being so enamored and attached to the hardcore scene. And then to become someone who what I do enables people to travel from far off places once a year to come to the city and support these bands. There becomes a place of respect, and a role shift puts responsibility on my shoulders. So you have to be cognizant of the role that you play in people's lives. So I had to meter some of the stuff that was outlandish about me down just because you don't want to be a character of yourself. And I kind of also got comfortable with who I am. Like, yeah, man, like there's a lot of shit that I am that is really cool, and a lot of shit that I am that people think is nerdy. Somehow the nerdy shit about me became the coolest stuff, and it fucking blows my mind. Like if you would have told me when I was 13 that all these kids would run around and love Typo Negative and all these bands that we were kind of like made fun of for liking, it would fucking blow my mind. I feel like at a 40-year-old man, everything that we grew up on is the coolest shit ever. Where if you like Star Wars as a kid, like there's so many things. So it all kind of come full circle. And I've never taken myself very seriously. And I've never had the time to take myself seriously because I'm always on to the next thing. Booking the next show, booking the next tour. The gang shit added a whole nother layer to it. There were so many micro things that were moving the way things work so many times that I never had time to get too self-absorbed. I've always had a shitty excuse me. I always had a shitty self-image, not someone who really looks in the mirror much, very badly dressed. You see me, I got a numb side on my face. I spit when I talk. Definitely not a pretty boy, so I never had a worry about image too much, but I've always been excited around people and been able to laugh and make jokes and take jokes. And I find that there's a way that you can, the way that I can show people to not take me seriously is to do a movie like that, or to subsequently have memes about me, or when we did these different movies and different things. I mean, there was a movie that Sonny did where he made me look like a baby, he spread baby food all over my fucking face. It's the most stupid thing ever. And I think there's like a weird fucking sadistic Sonny thing where Sonny, like, he didn't tell me, but he drew a map on my back in black magic marker. He's like, yeah, I came up with this great idea to move the plot. Okay, I got to draw a map on your back. And I just started thinking it's the funniest thing ever. I'm like, yeah, let's fucking do it. It's so stupid. And I find stupid humor to be great because it just sets up people to be like, is this guy retarded? Is this guy like serious? Like, what's he doing this? So it's really just like, you have to make fun of yourself. And I've never taken some of the, maybe when I was really young, took something seriously, but everything's moved too quick to overanalyze it. And it's only now that I'm old or older doing the podcast. So there's a lot of introspection and a lot of self-realization in conversation that I'm able to talk about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I fucking like it. But it's good to see that side of you, and all the silly videos and the shit you've done, compared to, 5 years prior or 3 years prior when, you had your own little feature on History Channel when you did the gangland thing, like that's total opposite of how you think of yourself and how you said, you feel more respected when somebody busts your balls, but on the thing they portrayed you as such a, you know, intense and serious person. And it seemed like none of that was highlighted on the Gangland episode.
Now the gangland was brought to me by someone else in the crew, and I was 1 foot in and 1 foot out at the time. As I said, I had a family to think about. I had a bad situation with my kid's mother. I had a lot going on, and I was constantly reliving mistakes that were made earlier in the cruise shit. And yet at the same time, I didn't want to not be included because I felt as if, and if you see in the episodes, FSU has a lot of different aspects to it, but I was very concerned about not having a presence in it and it just being skewed in one way or only being represented with certain things. And so I try to be a representative at the time for what I thought was my perspective of it. Like you want to, if someone's going to talk about things that you're involved in and you're able to communicate, you should want to make sure that you have a stake in what's being said. In hindsight, obviously, I think I would have taken a different direction, but I was 27, turning 28 when that was recorded. And looking back when I'm 40, I just kind of laugh. Every once in a blue moon, someone will see it from work. They're like, dude, what the fuck? And then we have a talk about it. And there was a minute where it was running like every Friday on like some TV show, and I would get a phone call or a text of the screen. I've come to terms with it. I mean, we were also in Rolling Stone magazine for being
Yeah, I seen that
in
one.
the crew. And rightfully so. I think that there was a time when the ideology of a punk rock gang and there were people that were killed and there was things going on to spark that. And so I will just say that was media and its focus at the time. And we just happened to be something that the media wanted to speak on. And the funniest thing that happened on that show didn't air was that we were walking around South Street and I was telling stories. You see a clip of it where I'm outside talking about the TLA fight.
Yeah.
But 25 minutes before that, some young boy rolled up and was like, yeah, I'm going to take that camera. I'm like, yeah, you need to fall back. And the guy shooting the film was like, you don't even know what show this is. And the guy's like, nah, man, fuck out of here. Yo, what's up with that camera? And the guy's like, well, this is for Gangland. The guy's like, oh, use it again? I'm like, yeah, you want to get it? You want hands? Like, what you want to do? Come on. Like, why are you trying to be an asshole? And for a minute, Alfred at Jim Stakes, I thought I was going to bust this motherfucker in the face on the show. And the guy's like, nah, I'm good. I'm like, nah, like, come on. You want to steal his camera? What's up? Like, and this is like Then I was ready to drop hands on anything. It's just kind of like a funny.
Fired up. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, yo, all right, now I'm getting tested, and the cameras right now. I'll bust your ass even worse for that. And it's super funny that I didn't make it into the shot because that would probably
Nah.
been bad. That would
Even
probably
the
been fun.
confrontation would have been good enough, you
Yeah,
know?
I think it's solely because he wasn't rolling, and the
Oh
guy
yeah.
was kind of like saying some dumb young boy stupid shit. And for me, I was like, oh, bet let's fucking bang,
Yeah,
like.
yeah. Hey, no.
And I
Ugh.
mean, at that time, I was facing 10 years in jail. Probably being on gangland is directly related to how I didn't beat the case clear and outright. But I also, you roll some dice, you make decisions. I'm not upset about anything that I've done, and I say I'm not upset about anything I've done because I've come to terms with how I got to that situation, where were my motivation, and what I would do differently now. And there's plenty of things I've done in my life that probably are not acceptable by regular people, aren't the best things to do in the hardcore world, but we're past that. And the people that matter don't hold me to that. There was a time 5 years or 4 years ago where I made a comment on my friend's Facebook page with no context to anything going on, which is a complete mistake on my end. Where there was a fire in Oakland. I was out with my daughter, who I rarely ever see. She was getting ready to go in the Navy, so we took her to a Christmas thing at Hershey Park. So I'm not on the internet. I'm driving into work, and I used to listen to the same radio show every day because it would tell you traffic reports, and I'd had to leave work by 6 a.m. So I'm listening. I hear blah blah blah. Ravers dying in a fire, and I'm like, well, fucking ravers. Like no big deal. Didn't think about it too much. And then a friend of mine was talking about how he wants to, what the hell did he say? Oh, that's right. He wanted to fix, because he's an electrician, he wanted to fix a bunch of DIY places that don't have fires anymore. And my dumb ass, with no contacts and no understanding that this was like a punk place where there was transgender children or anything involved in this, was like, yeah, fuck raves, like, electronic music is blah 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 blah, which is so dumb because half of what I listen to now is electronic music and probably always have from the earliest times of me going to goth shows, new wave. I have friends that are techno DJs. Like there's all this just stupid shit that I should not have said. That's like a one comment that people will still write on shit I do. Like, well, he's the person who made this comment, and people have attached so many negative things to that comment. And it's like, yo, I used to smash people with a fucking hammer at shows. Like so many
Right.
physically bad things that I've done, and I've moved forward on it. This is the first year where someone hasn't. I've been the first person to bring this up, and it's like I only bring it up because it's like 4 years. It took 4 years, and people still will somehow bring it up in Twitter. And it's like, yeah, I made a comment with no context because I'm a fucking idiot. And the lesson learned was there, like, Joe, you don't need to comment on everything that happens in this world, which was a smart lesson to learn. And hey, maybe you should look into what you're saying before you say it, because you stepped on a lot of people's emotions without. But the thing is, what people don't realize, and it was like, well, I was a part of that scene. It's like, yeah, I had to call a friend, Gibby from Panic, who I've been friends with for a very long time, because it was actually one of his friends who died in the fire. So I had to
Right.
call a friend and apologize and say, hey, man, I'm really fucking sorry. And he's like, I understand. He had a lot of bigger things going on. And also, regardless to this hardcore stuff, one of the guys who was involved in the production end and two people that I mistakenly had hang around and help us with shit. I called. He's like, yeah, I can't fuck with you no more. And I was like, dude, you do understand. No, fuck that. Because he was so concerned that people were going to be like, quote unquote, cancel me. That he was like, I don't want to deal with them. Hey,
Mm.
man, it is what it is. The same guy who now runs a very well known music magazine that's not Decibel used to be my friend who worked at Noisy. When he got fired at Noisy, he started this bullshit fake lamb goat. And he sent me a text, hey, just letting you know, I'm going to have to do a article on this. And he was going to have to do an article on it because he had money that he needed to make. So he made some bullshit post. And that's the one that people still quote. So here's a guy who, when he was working for Noisy, we had a good link up and they would send us bands and it was cool. The minute he was trying to make a name for himself as a journalist, he put it out on the internet like, promoter says horrible thing. And then my apology is still the same.
if I know you and you're my friend and you really lost someone in that fire, I will give you a earnest apology. But if you're some kid on the internet who's just looking for a gotcha moment, like Joe is not a good person because he wrote this on the internet, and here is the comment. There's a bunch of things in that comment because my friend Jesse took it down. There was a kid being like, "When I see you, I'm gonna spit in your face." I'm like, "Cool. Look forward to breaking your fucking jaw." And I'm still serious. It's been 4 years. I never got my face spit on by some kid who lives in New Jersey. There's all these immediate reactions that comes from shit that is written on the internet, and the context becomes less important than having this one singular second in word. Like, oh, he said this on the internet, so he is a terrible, unredeemable loser of a human, and that's just the complete opposite of how real life works. I watched my friends. I watched my friend have to go into a hospital, and his sister was shot to death. And I had to live through a lot of crazy trauma stuff and watch my friends deal with so many hardships, and my own family with crazy amount of hardships. And I've watched so many stories of redemption from people who have done things that you can redeem yourself from. If you're touching children or you're raping people, you
Die.
probably can't. Yeah, there's no redemption there. You just have a
Yeah.
deficiency where you just can't be on planet Earth. But
For sure.
a lot of other things, drug habits, theft, just doing terrible, fucked up shit, or having so many bad things happen to you as a child that you take it out on the world and they redeem themselves as people. And I say all this in relation to the gangland stuff, where for me, I don't even look at the gangland stuff in a negative. I just look at, oh, well, that's where I was at that time. And look how far I'm at. That was 12 years ago this summer.
Yeah.
And I bring the comment up as a like the juxtaposition of I was on fucking gangland and Rolling Stone for being in a gang and doing dumb shit and being associated people that were doing even crazier shit. And a lot of bad shit happened in that time period. And yet it's the comment out of context on a friend's private Facebook that people will slam me for today. It's a very weird world. And the only thing I can say is the things that I've learned about it have made me communicate differently on the internet, not to hide I have to hide how I feel. No, I realize that on the internet, without context, there's no point in communicating. So if I don't have something that can contextually be understood, I don't write anything on the internet. And I don't, I grew up loving Murder Junkies and Gigi Allen and some really crass, fucked up punk rock shit. So the fuck these guys and fuck this was very acceptable. And what I've come to realize is that's not the energy the world needs. So you don't see me say that. That's kind of what I got on that whole thing.
Feel you. Well said. Just anything. You're somewhat a public figure. People know who you are and shit. They follow you. So
I had to learn that as well. I think I just I don't look at people any differently. So I didn't realize that I myself have that kind of profile physically in the internet space of a profile, and people know me but don't know me. And I had to realize that my communication online is has effects, and negative and positive, more positive now than negative. And so I had to like relearn that. I didn't look at myself at that. You gotta remember is I was getting up every morning to go pour concrete and just be a normal human. And I looked at all my hardcore stuff as my outlet. I didn't have the awareness or the cognizance that people looked at me in a different light, because I'm a doer. I do things. So I'm never sitting around consulting myself or others on how am I portrayed. I don't worry about that. I just do. So I don't think
keep
of
moving.
how. Yeah, I just keep it moving. So I've been keeping it moving so long that I didn't have time to go, wait a minute, maybe this. And I understand it a lot more clearly. So even that stupid comment became a great learning thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. But so people who do talk shit or have something to say about whatever you said or your past, um, seems most of them still realize that they can get caught at a show. Whatever they say on the internet, it's still will affect them in real life. Whether they show up, to a show and you know in
I
Philly or Detroit or if in New Jersey, someone's going to see it. Someone's going to recognize, who said what. So I think a lot of people keep their opinions to themselves for the most part.
Well, it's easy. It's an easy thing to say. It's like, when I see you, I'm going to. And
Yeah.
then when you're not, like, oh no, like to this day, like there's people that don't like me from shit I did when I was 20 years old. I'm 40. It's like, I can't help you, bro. And there's people that there's people that I especially at the fest, I have 1,000 tasks in my head. I'm moving a million miles an hour. A 4-day fest feels like 8 hours to me sometimes. It moves that fast. And there's people that are like, hey, I just wanted to say what's up to you, but back in the day we had this thing, and it's like, none of that, like, none of all of it matters, and none of it matters at the same time. Like, every once in a blue moon, someone and I have like a legit life thing, but it's actually more, I say every person that I have a real life issue with for real are the people that are formally close to me that are no longer close to me. And anybody encountering me or had a bad mosh moment, or I punched your friend, or your friend got beat up, or maybe, whatever, that's not even something I would react on. Like, when I say I wouldn't even act on it, I wouldn't even react on it. I would go, oh fuck yeah. Either it's something I don't remember, or something that the consequences are so minimal to me, but they're more important to that person.
Yeah.
And so I try to tell people, like, I'm so far from that human now. And I think that the newest iterations come out often. The more we push ourselves to not be the people that we were striving to be last year, all that shit changes. And so, yeah, I'm still waiting to get my face spit on. And luckily, I don't know, man. I think that the hardcore scene has kind of moved. The hardcore scene has moved in a lot of different directions, and conflict is minimal because everyone, I don't know, maybe they just deal it out with Twitter, or maybe they're afraid to have conflict because they don't want to lose face. Where I grew up in a different scene. You get into a fight with someone, literally get into a fight, and a show later you're hanging out laughing about it. And that's how we grew up in the street, and that's how we grew up in the shows. But I think these younger folks specifically do not have that, so there's less actual physical contact. And I'm happy with who I am in 2020 and going into 21. And those of you who are griping on shit I did when I was a teen or didn't do when I was in my mid 20s, or the fact I was involved in cruise shit, like, it's growth. No one's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Same goes for me. There's lots of people who probably feel a certain way about me because of things I did or done, but I mean, reached out to a few of them. Like the whole Billy Madison thing. You reach out to that guy who's sitting with his rifle. Said, there's some of the things I've done. I've apologized for because I still see him at shows. I'm like, don't make it weird. So I'm gonna reach out to them and say, hey, I'm not the guy I used to be.
I was in high school playing soccer, and we made fun of the wrestlers. And at 38, I actually was 37, turned to 38, and I got into jiu-jitsu. Getting into jiu-jitsu, I realized how strong and tough those high school wrestlers were that we were making fun of super bad because we were on the soccer team. And I would Billy Madison them, like, I am so sorry that when we made, like, because
Yeah.
these motherfuckers, when we were playing soccer, were literally grinding out. I'm like, fuck playing soccer. I should have did wrestling. I'd be so much better at jiu-jitsu now that I'm older.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, mine was just a mushroom trip. Honestly, I woke up the next day like I did some shitty things to people. I need to apologize. And you know,
Well, that's movement forward,
we
and
learn different ways.
well, that's exactly it. But it's all moving forward.
Yeah. That's it. Just move forward. Do the best you can to be a good person, or you make amends with what you have done and fucking move on. You still there?
Yeah. I was.
Okay.
I thought you were continue. I thought you were going to continue.
No,
With that. I'm
no,
sorry.
no. I'm good. No. It's I'm had a pretty good conversation here so far.
Yeah, I think the world of hardcore, because it's in a short window, you got to remember the time that people are in it varies, and then like as you start looking at people that have been in it for longer and longer and longer, there's Vinny Stigma and Jimmy Murphy's Law and Kevin Seconds and all these different people that it has been there for 40 years. And then the longer time that you've been in, the less people have been in as long as you or around. And so what I've come to realize is so many people in hardcore or people who've had experiences within the hardcore scene, their time is a window. 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and then they're on to real life, which is where the Peter Pan shit I was talking about comes in. So it's easier for people who are no longer around to hold a special place of anger or a frustration or being upset with at moment in time because their time in the hardcore thing was shorter and they put a lot more emphasis on the well, this bad thing happened, so all of this is bad. And it's like I've had so many bad things happen because of shows. I've had so many good things happen because of shows. And every important person in my life to this day, with the exception of my little sister and now my nephews, are the direct relationship to someone that I interact with directly firsthand or was introduced to from hardcore. So hardcore has just given me everything I've had in my life. And so I hold it dear, and there's no difference between the two. And until I'm in a older point in my life, it's going to be the same way. You know, maybe when I hit my mid 50s or so, I'll have something, and maybe I'll pass it down. I don't know. I don't want to even think about that. But what I was getting at is it's easier for people who have a shorter window of time to hold on to grudges because to them they postulate on and go, oh, that's involved in hardcore. And that guy's horrible forever. And then if they had the modern conversation with you, they, or you or I, they might be like, oh wow, the person's completely different. Yeah, because your little snapshot of the person that you had an interaction with, it's like a fucking Polaroid. That person's so much different in today's world. And I've given that same growth expectancy to people. Like not just expecting people to have me have growth, but I've given people that be like, oh well, when I met them or when they had this interaction with them, they weren't a good person. Or they did something that I didn't agree with. But they're older now, so I'm sure they're a totally different person.
Right. Yeah. Well, shit, man. So with all that being said, for 2021 around the corner, I think there's going to be this is hardcore.
I had planned to go. Remember, or I should say, don't remember, but remember that this hardcore was at the end of August, so we shifted to July incrementally. We did it because first off, we were a week into when the college year was and going dating ourselves here. I put a MySpace bulletin out being like, name 3 things you would change about this hardcore. And the response back was, this hardcore should be on this week of August because that's the week before college starts. Having never been in a college, despite living in Philadelphia, a big college city, never really hit me the weekend that college starts. So I accidentally had started the fest a week or so into the college year. And the year we shifted was the first year we started having even bigger numbers because people could go to this hardcore and then start college. And then incrementally, as like Sound of Fury stopped being a thing, we eventually moved into the last week of July. And I think Sound of Fury was going to be on the second week of July, or they somehow or another they ended up being the second or third week, like within a week of our fest again in this new iteration of what Sound of Fury is. So we're not stuck to being a certain weekend. And if all the people who have been bullshitting us for years, or this whole fucking year rather, are going to say that it's going to be till halfway through the year before things even start happening, the wisest thing for me to do is to have 2 separate dates held and a backup plan and try to make something happen, even if it's at the smallest level, just to be able to say, hey, well, we did something at 2021. And that was initially going to be the plan, was to have something at a skate park until the city completely shut down that. And despite my punk rock fuck you attitude, you don't want to see people actually, you don't want to see people bring home COVID to somebody else, even if they're asymptomatic and all that. And you don't want to be someone who is careless with other people's health. And so there's enough people that really, really buy in and they're like masked up. They don't leave the house. Those people weren't coming to this hardcore, but the last thing we wanted to do was add to a spread or end up with $100,000 of fines or potentially even actually like criminal things. So I backed off doing it. I feel that we will have to watch and see, listen for how the restrictions will change. Right now, the restrictions are pretty serious in Philadelphia. Maybe they'll back down. I don't know. But my plan would say keep the dates around the time we traditionally have done it over the last 5 years. And if we need to be later in the season, then hey man, it's a little bit more stripped down this hardcore, and then build off of it. But my plan is not to go back to the Electric Factory, so I have a lot of flexibility on what I'm able to do, and I really want to give somebody something in the form of a real show. So my heart and intention is to do that.
Awesome. That's fucking great, man. Only time will tell, though. But Detroit's the same way. Real tough restrictions. We can't go anywhere. It seems maybe the fucking gym or to get haircuts. That's it. No restaurants, none of that shit. So
yeah, we don't have gyms yet, but we do have some things going on. For me specifically, I just want to see people engaging it in a live form.
Yeah.
And I'll do everything I can to make it happen. Barring, I don't want to go fund me for $100,000 fine. I don't need any more criminal shit. So
no shit.
I'm gonna be a law-abiding citizen.
Right. Come July, August, September 2021. One answer, one word. When I come to Philly, where do I get my first cheesesteak?
I have a preface to this. And Philadelphia is big. Like, we probably should be multiple small cities like Boston and we'd be thriving. So the city is giant. And I need to say this to answer the question. If you're downtown, the place to go would be Angelo's right now. But if you were up near my neighborhood, I live near D'Alessandro's, which is, to me, probably the best quality cheesesteak. Second to that, I always say that Jim's Roast Pork, which it is a roast pork place. They have a banging fucking cheesesteak. I do not subscribe to Pat's, Gino's at all. The only South Philly one, Angelo's is technically in South Philly, but I would say Angelo's is the bougie spot. It's the new spot. I love Jim's. You could get away with saying Phillips. I don't fuck with Tony Luke's. I don't fuck with Pat's. I don't fuck with Gino's. I live closer to D'Alessandro's, and actually one of the best benefits of COVID is D'Alessandro's used to be one of the most stressful situations to get a steak. Now you can call ahead, order, stand in a separate line because you can't go inside, and they actually fixed all the problems. But I hope that post-COVID they keep it, because going to D'Alessandro's was walking into a small place, getting in an insane closed line, and just waiting for your name to get called, and it was just chaos. Now it's so orderly that I hope they keep it. But yeah, that's my picks. Good.
Well, I wrote those down because I'm fucking coming. So yeah. I'm a recording shit. See if I can catch anybody at This Is Hardcore.
I really think my plan, one of the things I did outlet was like, we really should have booths set up so people can podcast from the fest. And I really love now being involved with podcasting in hardcore. So we're going to try to, there could be some, you're the second person I've said this to. I'm going to try to get a hardcore podcasting thing together in a live format for hardcore podcasts in its own right on top of the festival and maybe in junction with the festival.
That's fucking cool, man. That should be, it's such a big thing now. It's almost,
I'm glad that
why wouldn't it be included?
I'm glad that we have people that are documenting our culture and interesting people that are getting to speak. And there's obviously always going to be simple podcasts. And I say simple in the regard of like, oh, this band, like, trying to use it like a promotion. Those things exist. That's not my interest with it. There's some fantastic people doing podcasts, and I think we could do some fun shit with it alongside the fest. And if the right situations are there for us, we definitely will do something like that. So I'd love to see you there. We've only had one person before. We have two people ever before be involved in our at the fest around the podcast. One is a guys who did Cinepunks, and they would do a live one, and then in effect, because they kind of had their own thing going for a minute. Those guys also would come and do podcast stuff, and those are the only two people we've had at the fest. So it'll be cool to see more people do it at the fest.
I'll be there, man.
Awesome.
I appreciate you taking the time out Sunday afternoon.
Thank you for thinking of me. No, this is good.
No,
this is good.
no, you're important, to the whole shit, across the globe, had all the bands, you've talked to all the different promoters, and and I myself, I've never been in a band, never promoted. So if I can give something back in this form, you know, why the fuck not?
I think you're on the right page, and I think that as you get better with what you're looking to do, I think that you have all the necessary traits to make sure that your direction is like your own space. And I think that someone needs to document the people around you, and be it in like literal form of document, or just have these people on so they can espouse on their time. There's so many people from the area, and like you live close, so like you might be able to get Tesco V from the Meat Men, and that guy alone, his book's important. He's important. His zine was important. There's so many people in that
Mhm.
area
Yeah.
because you guys are a Midwest place that it's harder to get seen in the same regard as the fucking New Yorks or LA's of the world. And so I think that you have a great spot to illuminate people and give them a voice. You know.
Well, thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me,
All right, man. I'm gonna cut this off.
brother. Thank you.
All right.